Wait a moment. Right after issuing the previous command, Ren Qingyuan suddenly thought of something, and he hurriedly raised his hand and clenched his fist. Voila! The surrounding space immediately solidified to form an isolation barrier. The Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters were protected by a powerful formation, making it difficult for any outsiders to listen in on what was happening within. Yet, despite the defensive measures, Ren Qingyuan was still prompted to form an isolation barrier to further ensure the confidentiality of the matter, which went to show how seriously he took this matter. The Celestial Master Teacher concerns the ultimate fate of mankind, so this matter must be kept absolutely confidential. I suspect that the sudden arrival of that person in the Master Teacher continent might be tied to this matter. He might have noticed something, which prompted him to make this move. That fellow has always been skilled in disguise, so our scouts haven't been able to find any traces of him yet. If news concerning the emergence of a Celestial Master Teacher reaches his ears, and he manages to find the Celestial Master Teacher ahead of us, things could really get troublesome, Ren Qingyuan said with a grim look on his face. So, I want all of you to head out under the pretext of looking for Zhang Xian. Make sure to put on a sufficiently convincing act to show the Zhang clan and the Glacier Plain court that we are determined to bring them justice. At the same time, however, you are to discreetly search for the Celestial Master Teacher, and once you find him, don't rush into acknowledging him. Instead, protect him from the shadows. While he might be the Celestial Master Teacher, it is unlikely for him to have grown to Kong Shi's level yet, or else we would have already heard of him. Celestial Master Teacher only represented an individual who had received the acknowledgement of the heavens. It was a symbol of character and talent, rather than a gauge of one's absolute strength. Even Kong Shi had not been born strong. He had advanced a step at a time before maturing to become the great man he had been. If the Celestial Master Teacher had already matured into a formidable expert, he would have already made a name for himself in the world, and there was no way that Ren Qingyuan, as the Deputy Pavilion Master, would not have heard of him. We understand. The Master Teachers nodded in acknowledgement. I'll repeat it once more. The most important thing now is finding the Celestial Master Teacher and protecting him, Ren Qingyuan emphasized with a wave of his hand. Also, regarding the matter concerning the Celestial Master Teacher, I want all of you to maintain a silent restraint on it. Don't even mention it in passing among yourselves. I won't hesitate to strip you of your Master Teacher license and banish you to the subterranean gallery for life should you dare contravene this silent restraint. We understand, Pavilion Master Run, the Master Teachers replied resoundingly. Hula. After the orders had been relayed, the Master Teachers swiftly scattered into the surroundings from the Teacher Acknowledgement Hall, leaving only Ren Qingyuan behind. Ren Qingyuan hesitated for a moment before flicking his wrist, and a couple of puppets appeared before him. These puppets were of short stature, and they did not wield too much strength. However, their extraordinary long arms and their 10-fingered hands were particularly eye-catching. As soon as the puppets materialized, without the slightest word of delay, they immediately scattered around the Teacher Acknowledgement Hall and got to work. In less than an hour, the collapsed rubble was restored to its original glory. Even the ancestral tablets had been placed neatly back onto their respective positions, as if nothing had happened at all. After collecting all of his puppets, Ren Qingyuan gazed into the distance with a deep look in his eyes. Some time later, he exhaled deeply and muttered, "Celestial Master Teacher, it seems like the heavens are looking after us." This time, the unique surge of energy lingered around Zhang Xian for a longer time than before. Zhaoye knew that a sudden epiphany must have struck her teacher, so she chose not to interrupt him. She took a seat not too far away and looked at him silently. During that period, Zhang Xian remained completely motionless on the spot. Unlike previous times, he did not pass out, and there was not any peculiar phenomenon either. He felt as if he was swimming in the ocean of time, unable to accurately discern the flow of time around him. Under the tempering of the unique aura, his soul depth soared furiously. His advancement this time around was far greater than any of the previous times, surging from the initial 25. 1 to 29. 1. For master teachers, soul depth was usually separated in intervals of 3. With a soul depth of 29. 1. Zhang Xian was already at the level of the most pinnacle 9-star master teacher. With the rise in his soul depth, his analytical capabilities were further enhanced, allowing him to peer deeper into an issue and look further ahead. Many things that he had been unable to make sense of or unable to draw connections with suddenly cleared up in his mind. At the same time, his analysis of the many cultivation techniques and battle techniques in his mind also became much more thorough, as if he was suddenly able to look right into their crux. Even though I have never cultivated any Saint 8 Dan dimension, sundering realm cultivation techniques before, I was still able to roughly figure my way forward from the cultivation techniques I have gathered in the past. Furthermore, Zhaoye is my student, and her energy stems from the same origin as mine, so I was able to gather the momentum required for a breakthrough under her infusion of energy, thus reaching my current level. Previously, Zhang Xian had still been a little perplexed as to how he was able to abruptly push for a breakthrough back when he was still at the Glacier playing court. Back then, he did not think too much into it, and the impetus to break through simply came perfectly naturally to him. However, with the rise in his soul depth, the veil on this mystery was finally removed. Zhang Xian shook his head and sighed. It's a pity that I'm still unable to think of a feasible way to reconstruct Zhaoye's meridians. Even though he had managed to form mental connections between the many fields of knowledge that he had learned, he was still completely clueless as to how he could help Zhaoye reconstruct her meridians. From the looks of it, he only had his current plan to rely on, heading to the blacksmith guild and seeing if there was any suitable material that could be used to replace her meridians. Exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Zhang Xian opened his eyes. Teacher, are you done cultivating? Zhaoye asked with a hint of doubt in her voice. She had thought that her teacher's cultivation would surge after this round of cultivation, but nothing had happened at all. There was not the slightest change in his cultivation that she could perceive. If she had to point out something that was different about him, it would be that he appeared more spirited than before, and his eyes had grown deeper and more unreadable. Yes. Zhang Xian nodded. I see. Zhaoye heaved a sigh of relief. We'll be heading back to the Empire Alliance city. This time, we're going to resolve the problem concerning your meridians, said Zhang Xian as he stood up. Teacher, the entire continent is looking to capture you. It's too dangerous, so let's not head there anymore. Zhaoye spoke up worriedly. It had not been easy for them to leave the Empire Alliance city, yet her teacher actually wanted to head back there. Don't worry. Even 9-star pinnacle master teachers would have trouble seeing through my disguise. I won't be in any danger, Zhang Xian reassured with a smile. With his 5th acknowledgement of celestial master teacher, his soul depth had surged from 25.1 to 29.1, putting him amid the top even among 9-star pinnacle master teachers. Even if an expert of Elder Chu's caliber came over, the other party would still be unable to find the slightest discrepancy in his disguise, let alone figure out his true identity. However, your disguise is still a little lacking at the moment. Alright, I'll impart a physical body cultivation technique to you. While Zhang Xian was able to disguise himself even from the discerning eyes of 9-star master teachers, due to Zhaoye's lack of cultivation, while her disguise might still be able to fool the eyes of ordinary cultivators, the same could not be said about high-ranked master teachers. Due to the awakening of her purine body, her appearance was simply too striking. Once her disguise was seen through, it would not be too difficult for others to figure out their true identity. Physical body cultivation technique? Teacher, my meridians have collapsed completely. Will I still be able to practice it? Zhaoye asked apprehensively. Despite the term, physical body cultivation technique usually required the infusion of jinqi in order to temper one's body into a state that no ordinary mortal would be able to achieve. Given that Zhaoye had already lost all of her meridians, she did not think that she would be able to practice a physical body cultivation technique. I have altered the cultivation technique so that you will be able to practice it even without using your meridians. However, you'll have to practice it in accompaniment with my silver needles. Here is the cultivation technique manual. Zhang Xian raised his finger and tapped it lightly on Zhao Ya's head, and knowledge swiftly surged into the latter's mind. Zhao Ya spent roughly 2 hours looking through the cultivation technique manual before she was finally able to grasp it, and her eyes lit up in excitement. Her teacher's physical body cultivation technique was truly formidable. Compared to that, all of the Glacier Plain Court's physical body cultivation techniques seemed like trash picked right off the street. Alright, let's begin. Seeing that Zhao Ya was done going through the manual, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist, and innumerable silver needles flew out from his hands, piercing all over Zhao Ya's body. The surges of heaven's path Shenqi infused in each of the silver needles nourished her body, enhancing her strength. While Zhang Xian was in the midst of helping Zhao Ya cultivate the heaven's path golden art, at the entrance of a sealed chamber of the Combat Master Hall, a large group of anxious-looking combat masters were gathered. Today was the very day that the progeny of combat would finally come out of seclusion. The progeny of combat is about to come out. Have you thought about how you are going to report that matter to him? An elder broke the silence in the surroundings. Let's just report it straight to him as it is. What's there to hesitate over? A valiant middle-aged man dressed in a full armor said with a wave of his hand. Report it straight to him as it is? It's not as if you don't know the personality of our progeny of combat. Back then, despite the heavy injuries that he had sustained after clearing the Dragon Gate formation, he still gritted his teeth tenaciously and held on just so that he could issue his first progeny of combat decree to command all of the combat masters to treat his teacher with the utmost respect. The elder replied with a frown. Just think about the mess that has occurred. If we report the matter as it is to him, given how highly he regards his teacher, do you think that he'll be able to remain rational? If he kicks up a fuss, it could end up utter chaos. The Sanctum of Sages is a subsidiary of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, so there's no need for us to worry about them. The problem lies mainly with the Zhang clan and the Glacier Plain Court. Those two might be major powers on the Master-Teacher continent, but our Combat Master Hall hasn't grown so weak that we have to defer and explain our actions to them yet. The armored middle-aged man harumphed coldly. Those powers have grown too accustomed to the peace, and they are already starting to rot on the inside. If not for the sweat and blood of our combat masters, do you think that they would be able to enjoy the prosperity and peace that they have today? Elder Meng is right. When has our Combat Master Hall needed to explain our actions to others? Another middle-aged man remarked with a fling of his sleeves. We have always used our strength to speak. Back then, the Soul Oracle Guild commanded countless soulless metal humanoid, but they still ended up being completely eradicated by our forces. If I have to say, the Master-Teacher Pavilion has simply been too soft on them. It's because we give them so much leeway that they had the guts to question the judgment of the Master-Teacher Pavilion. If it was me, I would have just ordered them to back down. And should they dare to refute my words, I would force them into submission. The elder shook his head and replied, they are master teachers, not punks or tyrants. The reason the Master-Teacher Pavilion has remained standing even after several dozen millenniums is by the virtue of its actions, and not through forceful subjugation. If we force everyone into submission using brute force, how can we truly gain the respect of others? A middle-aged man standing not too far away sneered coldly. Respect? Do you think we really need to win their respect? Senior uncle? The 8-star blacksmith was stunned for an instant before a deep frown surfaced on his forehead. With a livid expression he growled. Friend, just who in the world are you? Don't you think it's inappropriate to say such a joke? How could he possibly not recognize his own senior uncle? He was certain that he had never met the person standing in front of him before, so it was obvious that the other party was teasing him. You said that I'm joking? Do you really not recognize me? Zhang Xian shook his head as he raised his hand. Hung Long. A powerful might swiftly shrouded the 8-star blacksmith, threatening to crush him into bits. After his cultivation had advanced to Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage, his grasp over his strength had become further refined. In fact, he could already deal with most Saint Nine Dan primary stage cultivators with ease. While the person before him was an 8-star blacksmith, His cultivation was only at phantasmal space realm pinnacle. The 8-star blacksmith's body instinctively tensed up in the face of the impending threat, and he hurriedly drove his jinshi and launched a palm strike to counterattack. But before his palm could strike, the crushing pressure that was pressing down on him abruptly vanished without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. Perplexed, he quickly looked at the young man before him once more, only to see that the latter had already placed his hands behind his back at some point in time. The young man was looking at him too, and with a slightly displeased look on his face he asked, "Since you claim that you don't know me, allow me to ask you then. Is your name Chinemo?" "Yes, I am indeed Chinemo," the 8-star blacksmith Chinemo replied. There was no one in the blacksmith guild who did not know of his name, so it did not come as a wonder to him that the young man knew his name. "Your teacher is 9-star blacksmith Liu Yang. You inherited the Liu Yang forging art from him, but you specialize in the Hongdian forging art instead. The ring finger of your left hand was once scorched by earth flames while you were in the midst of smithing. I didn't make a mistake, right?" Zhang Xian asked calmly. "This. You are right." Chen Mo was stunned for a moment before shaking his head. That information can easily be found by asking around in the blacksmith guild, so it doesn't mean a thing at all. I know that it can be easily uncovered, but the Hongdian forging technique requires precise coordination of all 10 fingers in order to bring out its full prowess. Back when you were studying the technique, due to a small error, you ended up hurting your ring finger. As such, whenever you are tempering a weapon, it will begin curling and uncontrollably. While it doesn't affect the final product that you are creating too much, still, it does prevent you from achieving fine control over your strength. There aren't too many people who are aware of this, right? Zhang Xian chuckled softly. "Why you?" Chen Mo's body stiffened straight. He did have such a habit in his smithing. While it was nothing major, there were not too many people in the blacksmith guild who were aware of this little quirk of his. So for the other party to speak of it so decisively, as if he had seen it with his own eyes, could the other party really be from the same lineage as him? Not only so, I also know that there are many flaws in your Hongdian forging art. In fact, Senior Liu Yang instructed me to come here in order to correct your problems in the hope that you can push for a breakthrough soon. However, I'm also aware that I don't have any token or the sort that I can use to prove my identity either. So if you still don't trust me after what I have said, there's nothing I can do about it." Zhang Xian said with a wave of his hand. "You are here to correct my problems?" Chen Mo frowned doubtfully. "Indeed, there are 3 major flaws in your forging technique. Firstly, you have a tendency to overcomplicate the forging process. You attempt to bring every single phase of the forging process to the level of perfection, refining every ore to the extremity, but ironically, your attempts to do so often end up affecting the fusion of the ores." Zhang Xian pointed out with a light smile. Chen Mo's body jolted upon hearing those words. The other party was right, he did have such a habit. He had tried to get rid of the habit before, but whenever he tried to do so, he would end up missing the ideal fusing time for the ores, thus resulting in a failed product. As time went by, he had eventually given up on it. Smithing was an extremely complicated and delicate process, and even the slightest lapse could cause the greatest difference. Despite being an 8-star blacksmith, he was still unable to ensure perfection in his smithing. Secondly, your Hongdian forging art is focused on searching for the crux of the material you are processing and hammering right on it, so as to create an even more wholesome product. You have no trouble finding the crux of the ores that you are processing, but it's a pity that you are slightly lacking in speed. Zhang Xian continued. Chen Mo's body jolted once more. It was almost the other party had seen him forging with his own eyes. Astonishingly, every single point that the other party had raised was spot on. Thirdly, Zhang Xian continued speaking. By the time all 3 flaws were raised, Chen Mo's body was already drenched in cold sweat. Those were indeed the 3 greatest errors in his smithing. He was aware of them, and had tried to change them several times, only to have failed. It was precisely due to those issues that his smithing had ended up meeting a bottleneck. Is there any way to resolve my problems? Unable to remain calm any longer, Chen Mo clasped his fist and bowed. He still was not too sure whether the other party was really his senior uncle or not. But one thing was for sure. The other party was far ahead of him in the field of smithing. Like I said, your teacher has sent me over to correct your mistakes. It goes without saying that I have my own ways to resolve your flaws. Zhang Xian replied with a smile. It was not convenient for him to take out his 8-star blacksmith emblem at the moment, but in terms of his knowledge in smithing, even 9-star primary blacksmiths would struggle to match up to him. All it took him was a slight moment of contemplation, after browsing through Chen Mo's flaws in the Library of Heaven's Path, for him to come up with a solution to resolve those problems. Zhang Xian swiftly imparted several methods to Chen Mo that he could use in order to resolve those 3 major flaws in his smithing. I see. After hearing Zhang Xian's pointers, Chen Mo could not help but widen his eyes in awe. The other party's words had truly enlightened him. Thank you, senior uncle. As he spoke, he kneeled down to the ground and kowtowed to Zhang Xian earnestly. Zhang Xian glanced at the kneeling man before him and said, You aren't going to doubt me anymore? No, of course not. Chen Mo replied with an embarrassed chuckle. Just the fact that the other party had pointed out the many flaws in his forging technique, and even raised feasible methods to resolve them. Even if the other party was not his senior uncle, he was already as good as a half-teacher to him. Good. To tell you the truth, other than to correct your smithing, I also have some business here that I will have to trouble your guild leader with. I'll need you to bring me to him. Zhang Xian said, You wish to meet our guild leader? That won't be a problem at all. This way, please, Chen Mo said as he quickly led the way forward. Having witnessed the entire scene, Xiaoyu was more awestruck than ever by her teacher. She had known all along that her teacher was a very resourceful man, but she did not think that he would actually be able to win an 8-star blacksmith over with just a couple of words, and turn the other party into his junior. Even when witnessing the entire process with her own eyes, she could hardly believe what she was seeing. With an 8-star blacksmith leading the way, it did not take too long for them to meet the guild leader. The guild leader appeared to be an elder in his 60s. His hair had already turned snow white, and with a swift examination, Zhang Xian could tell that the other party was a Saint 8 Dan Pinnacle cultivator. Chen Mo stepped forward and said, Guild leader, my senior uncle has come to visit, and he wishes to have a word with you. Your senior uncle? Surprised by Chen Mo's words, the guild leader swiftly got to his feet and clasped his fist. Senior, may I know how I should address you? He was peers with Chen Mo, so that would make Chen Mo's senior uncle his senior as well. I am Wu Zhangxian, and this young lass beside me is my student. To be honest with you, my student got injured a while back, so I came over hoping to request your aid. Zhang Xian clasped his fist. So it's Blacksmith Wu. May I know what you need my help on? As long as it's within my power, I'll definitely try my best to assist with your student's treatment. The guild leader replied with a kind smile. My student made a mistake in her cultivation, resulting in her meridians sustaining some damage. So, I have come to your blacksmith guild in hopes of finding a material that I could possibly use to substitute her meridians in driving Jinshi, Zhang Xian said. A substitute for meridians? The guild leader contemplated deeply for a moment before saying, Meridians are pathways within a cultivator's body that allows for the movement of spiritual energy and Jinshi. As a cultivator advances their cultivation, they will be able to strengthen and widen their meridians, allowing energy to flow even smoothly through them. I'm afraid that I can't think of any material in our blacksmith guild that has such properties. The meridians of a cultivator were not lifeless objects. They could evolve along with the cultivator's advancing cultivation as well. A stronger cultivator would be able to expand their meridians so as to allow them to harness more power, and vice versa. While there was a huge range of artifacts and materials in the blacksmith guild, none of them had the properties suited for substituting the role of meridians. There isn't any material in your blacksmith guild that can be used to substitute meridians? Zhang Xian frowned. If I recall correctly, there are some weapons that can extend and contract at will. Is it not possible to use those to substitute as meridians? There were formidable weapons in this world that could alter their sizes freely. For example, while the sanctum head token in Zhang Xian's hands was roughly only the size of a palm usually, it could grow to the size of a huge shield at his command. While there are weapons that cultivators can alter the form of at will, those are usually unable to harness Xinqi for too long. Furthermore, the development of the meridians isn't as simple as expanding and reinforcing them. There's a limit to how far one can do that. Eventually, it will come a point where the cultivator has to enhance the effectiveness of their meridians through spatial manipulation. Besides, it won't be easy to achieve delicate control over those materials, and one could easily get hurt as a result of that, the guild leader said with a bitter smile. Darn! Zhang Xian's face turned livid. He was also aware that it was unlikely that there was any material that could be a perfect substitute for human meridians, but he could not allow himself to give up just like that. He hoped that he might be able to receive a different answer from the mouth of another, but judging from what he had just heard, it seemed like reconstructing Zhao Ye's meridians through smithing did not seem to be something achievable. The guild leader was also able to roughly fathom Zhang Xian's intentions, so he could not help but shake his head as well. At this moment, a thought suddenly came to his mind, and he said, "Actually, there might still be hope for your student. While it's not too plausible to reconstruct your student's meridians through smithing, I did hear some rumors that someone had managed to pull off the replacement of meridians before." Someone managed to pull off the replacement of meridians? Who is it? Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. If someone in the world had succeeded in the replacement of meridians, that would mean that it was possible. Even if he could not do it himself, he could still search for the person in question and ask for their help. Before I go on, I would like to first say that these are only rumors that I have heard, and I am unable to verify their authenticity. From what I know, the matter didn't happen too long ago, just roughly 20 years if I recall correctly. An expert of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters went around the Master Teacher continent in search of a way to replace a person's meridians, and it seems like he succeeded in the end, the guild leader said. An expert of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters? Who is it? Zhang Xian asked anxiously. This would determine whether Zhao Yu would be able to recover or not, so he had to clutch at every possible lead that he could find. That person is Grand Elder Yang Xian of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, the guild leader replied. Yang Xian? Zhang Xian was stunned. For the longest period of time, he had been impersonating Yang Xian and claiming to be Yang Xian's student. It seemed like fate really had a way of pulling pranks on others. After all that had happened, the clue to resolving Zhao Ye's condition ended up being with a man whom he was so intricately linked with and direly wanted to avoid. Indeed, Yang Shi is a highly talented person. Putting aside the tremendous strength he wields, he's also well-versed in all of the occupations. Back then, in order to uncover a way to achieve the replacement of meridians, he even paid a visit to the head of our blacksmith guild headquarters and maintained correspondence with him for several years. Of course, I have no way of verifying those matters, so I'm afraid that you'll have to find the person in question to ask about it, the guild leader said. I see. Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella. It seems like I'll have to pay Yang Shi a visit then. Most likely, Yang Shi should still be in the Zhang clan. It would be dangerous, but it seemed like he would have to pay the Zhang clan another visit. Just that, he had impersonated the other party and claimed to be the other party's student. And now, he was even wanted by the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. If he met the other party, would the other party be willing to listen to what he had to say? Against First Elder Zhang Wuheng, he might still stand a chance of escape, but against Yang Shi, one of the strongest experts of the Master Teacher continent, if the other party meant him harm, would he be able to get away even if he utilized every method at his disposal? Yang Shi. Hearing those words, Zhao Yu felt a little lightheaded. Having seen Yang Shi transforming into her teacher with her own eyes, she knew that grand teacher of hers was actually just a persona that her teacher had created. Yet to hear the name again, what was going on? Yang Shi often spends his time roaming the world, such that he rarely returns to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters at all. So, I don't think that it'll be too easy for you to catch wind of his whereabouts. If the situation with your student is urgent, Physician Huang of the Physician Guild happens to be a close friend of mine. I could invite him over to have him help diagnose your student." Seeing the young man deep in thought, the guild leader thought that Zhang Xian was worried about his student's condition, so he sincerely offered his help. "Guild leader, thank you for your kind intentions, but I think it should be fine for the time being." Zhang Xian clasped his fist. He was just about to continue speaking when a blacksmith abruptly rushed into the room and said, "Guild leader, there's a master teacher outside who seeks your presence." The guild leader turned his head over and asked, "Master teacher? Who is it? What's his rank?" The blacksmith hesitated for a moment before replying. "He isn't wearing his emblem, so I'm not too sure what his rank is either. However, I think his surname is Yang. His surname is Yang." The guild leader fell into deep thought, but he could not think of any notable master teachers who went by the surname of Yang in the Empire Alliance. Nevertheless, he still nodded and said, "Invite him in." "Yes, guild leader." The blacksmith turned around and left the room. "Since you have a guest waiting for you, I shan't impose on you any longer and take my leave." Having found what he needed, there was no longer any reason for Zhang Xian to remain in the blacksmith guild any longer. Thus, he clasped his fist before leaving together with Zhaoya. However, before he reached the entrance of the room, footsteps suddenly sounded ahead of him, and following which, the blacksmith from before returned with an elder beside him. As the elder walked into the room, he suddenly turned his head toward Zhang Xian and asked with a smile, "This young friend over here, you just arrived, right? Are you leaving so soon?" Are you speaking to me?" Zhang Xian was taken aback by the abrupt words from the elder. The elder should be here to meet the guild leader, so why was the other party striking up a conversation with him instead? "That's right. Rather than saying that I'm here to pay a visit to the guild leader, it would be more exact to say that I am here for you." The elder stroked his beard as he spoke. "For me?" Zhang Xian frowned in bewilderment. The elder before him looked perfectly ordinary. While he was dressed in a master teacher robe, there was not an emblem signifying his rank pinned on his chest. There was an amiable smile on his face, which seemed to suggest that he bore no ill will. However, one thing was for certain: he had never met the elder in front of him before. "Have I met you before?" Zhang Xian asked. "Ha ha ha." Instead of replying to Zhang Xian's question, the elder chuckled softly before turning to the guild leader and blacksmith Chinemo. "Pardon me, but there are some private matters that I would like to talk to the young friend over here about." After saying those words, the elder flicked his finger, and an emblem came into the sight of the two blacksmiths. On the emblem were 9 gleaming stars. 9-star blacksmith? Upon seeing the emblem, both the guild leader and Chunemo leaped in shock. They hurriedly clasped their fists and replied, "Oh, of course, feel free to use this room." They had thought that the elder would show them his master teacher emblem, but who could have thought the other party would be a 9-star blacksmith as well? With a clear hierarchy established among them, they could not afford to defy a direct command from the other party. Walala! The duo quickly backed out of the room, leaving just Zhang Xian, Zhaoya, and the enigmatic elder. Wu Zhangxian, isn't the name you have come up for yourself a little too perfunctory?" Seeing that there was no one else in the room, the elder chuckled softly as he gazed deeply at Zhang Xian. "Isn't that so, Zhang Shi? Or perhaps should I address you as Sanctum Head Zhang?" You, not expecting the other party to not only be able to see through his disguise, but even be aware of his identity as a Sanctum Head candidate, Zhang Xian's goosebumps immediately rose in alarm. He immediately alerted his clone, so that the other party would be ready to make a move at any moment. "You are a master teacher, and you go by the surname Yang. Could you possibly be? Well, it seems like you have figured it out." Stroking his beard once more, the elder said with a smile, "Indeed, I am the person whom you have been impersonating all this time. Yang Xian." It's a play on words. In Chinese, the character Wu has the meaning of referring to oneself too. Half a day earlier, through the teleportation formation of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, Yang Shi and the others swiftly arrived at the Glacier Playing Courts and saw the devastation that had occurred there. All of the buildings had collapsed down to the ground, and beacons of smoke could be seen here and there. There were charred marks everywhere, be it on the collapsed rubble or the ground. And that was how he reduced the glacier playing court to its current state. Just thinking about what had just happened, Yuruashin's body could not stop trembling in rage. He had just undergone the phantasmal space ordeal in the Zhang clan, and left the entire place in tatters. But you're telling me that he underwent his dimension-sundering ordeal here shortly after. Zhang Wuheng couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had witnessed that fellow's phantasmal space ordeal with his own eyes, and even he had nearly been struck to death by it. Who could have thought that in less than a night, he would run over to the glacier playing court and undergo his dimension-sundering ordeal? Did that not mean that he had managed to raise his cultivation by 2 whole realms within the span of a single day? Was it really possible for anyone to be that overpowered? And more importantly, he had actually been able to make the lightning tribulation heed his commands and strike whatever he wanted it to. How in the world did he manage to do that? According to what you have said, he should have been severely wounded in the encounter, so it doesn't seem likely that he would be able to get too far away. Do you know which direction he headed off in? Yangshi asked. I'm not too sure. Yuruashin shook her head. He completely erased all traces of his presence, making it impossible to track him. I have already ordered the members of the glacier playing court to comb through the surrounding area, but none of them have been able to find any traces of him. Considering the young man's flight speed, he could not have gotten too far. However, when they finally recovered and started trying to track him down, it was as if he had vanished into thin air. Despite searching for more than a day now, they had not been able to find any traces of him at all. It was almost as if the young man had not been there in the first place. It seems like he's a hidden expert. He must have used some kind of special means to erase his presence, Yangshi remarked. Since there were cultivators who specialized in tracking, naturally, there were also those who were skilled in anti-tracking. There were experts in the world who could sneak from place to place without leaving any traces. If Zhang Xian truly possessed such means, then even someone as powerful as Yang Xian would have trouble tracking him down. That seems to be the case, but considering the injuries that he has sustained, I'm confident that he's still within a radius of 100,000 li around the glacier playing court. As long as we comb this area thoroughly, we would be able to dig him out, Yuruashin said confidently. Given how severely wounded Zhang Xian was, it would be impossible for him to get too far away. Furthermore, the Master Teacher Pavilion had also released an arrest warrant for him, and traveling in the open air would make it too easy for others to find and capture him. Building on these assumptions, she felt that Zhang Xian would still be within a radius of 100,000 li from the glacier playing court. As long as they dispatched enough manpower to comb through the area, they would surely be able to find that scoundrel. Yangshi turned to the group behind and proposed, Sword Saint Xing, Sword Saint Meng and First Elder, since there are no longer any clues on where he is, why don't we split up and search for him separately? It should be easier for us to find him this way. And whoever finds him first can alert the rest through our communication jade tokens. I guess that's the best we can do for now. Sword Saint Meng nodded worriedly. When she heard that the young man who could very well be her son was severely injured, she felt as if a knife had stabbed into her heart. She had considered exacting vengeance for her son on the glacier playing court, but seeing the pitiful state that they were already in, she had eventually dropped the idea. All she could think of at that moment was her injured son. Worried sick, she did not want to waste any more precious time dawdling around here. Let's go then. Knowing how his wife felt, Sword Saint Xing swiftly chose a direction, and the two of them left together. On the other hand, Zhang Wuheng hesitated for a moment, seemingly contemplating over something, before eventually choosing a direction and leaving as well. Elder Yu, I'll take my leave as well. Yangshi bade his farewell, before leaving in a certain direction. In just a few moments, the four of them had already vanished over the horizon. Shaking her head, Yuruashin turned her gaze back to the glacier playing court in order to supervise the disciples in its reconstruction. However, barely a moment later, the first elder of the Zhang clan, Zhang Wuheng, suddenly flew back over. Yuruashin quickly walked over and asked, Elder Wuheng, could it be that you have managed to find him? That isn't it. Zhang Wuheng shook his head. With an unreadable look on his face, he asked, "Which direction did Yang Shi leave in earlier?" Yang Shi. Yu Ruoxin was taken aback. Indeed. As one of the top experts of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, Yang Shi wields the ability to track down a person from their lingering presence. Even if Zhang Xian has concealed his aura, I find it hard to believe that Yang Shi would be unable to track him. Instead, I believe the reason he has suggested for us to split up is to shake us off and find him himself. I want to see just what he's up to. Zhang Wuheng harumphed. You are saying that Yang Shi knows where Zhang Xian is? So, as long as we follow Yang Shi, we would be able to find Zhang Xian as well? A glint flickered across Yu Ruoxin's eyes. Indeed. However, in view of Yang Shi's strength, we have to make sure to keep a safe distance away from him. It will be hard for us to explain our actions to him if he catches us tracking him, Zhang Wuheng said. I understand. Yu Ruoxin nodded as a wintry gleam surfaced in her eyes. This time, there's no way I'll allow him to slip through my fingers. We have to make that fellow pay the price for his actions. Zhang Wuheng nodded in agreement. A fellow who had appeared out of nowhere actually had the guts to lay waste to the Zhang clan. If they did not teach that fellow a lesson, how would the entire continent view the Zhang clan in the future? They could not allow the humiliation that they had suffered to slide just like that. While the two of them were discreetly discussing their plans, some distance away, Yang Shi stopped on a peak amid a mountain range. He flicked his wrist, and a mirror materialized in his hand. He swiftly formed several hand seals, and light began swirling on the surface of the mirror. Soon, the light converged to form something resembling a map. Ultimately, the Sanctum Head token is still an artifact forged by the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, Yang Shi muttered with a smile. He did wield extraordinary skills in tracking, just as Zhang Wuheng suspected, but Zhang Xian really did not leave the slightest trace at all when he left the Glacier Plain Court. Even to someone of his prowess, it appeared as if Zhang Xian had simply vanished into thin air. However, the Sanctum Head token that Zhang Xian had in his possession was an artifact belonging to the Master Teacher Pavilion. He could simply track the Sanctum Head token in order to find the young man's whereabouts. Studying the image on the mirror, Yang Shi was able to swiftly determine the location of the Sanctum Head token. It seems he has headed off to the Empire Alliance city. With a leap, he vanished from the spot. To be honest, he was not too concerned about the fact that Zhang Xian had impersonated him or claimed to be his student. Instead, the dominant feeling that he felt at this moment was pure curiosity. Despite his low cultivation, that young man had been able to impersonate him and fool even 9-star master teachers. How did the young man manage to pull something like that off? Roughly an hour after Yang Shi left the peak, the surrounding space suddenly distorted slightly, and two figures materialized into existence. The first elders of the Zhang clan and the Glacier Plain Court, Zhang Wuheng and Yu Ruoxin. Yang Shi had not intentionally concealed his presence, so it was not too difficult for the two of them to track his movements. It seems like he's heading toward the Empire Alliance city. After confirming the direction that Yang Shi had left in, Zhang Wuheng asked with a frown. Could Zhang Xian be in the Empire Alliance city? Very possibly. The closest major city to the Glacier Plain Court is the Empire Alliance city. Given the severe injuries Zhang Xian has sustained, there's no way he would be able to flee too far away. His best bet is to hide within a large crowd, and for that, there's nowhere better than the Empire Alliance city. Yu Ruoxin nodded in agreement. The best way to conceal one's presence from the world was not to dive into some remote mountain valley, but an ocean of people. The more people there were, the harder it would be for one to be found. Going by such an analysis, it was indeed very likely for Zhang Xian to be in the Empire Alliance city. It boasted the greatest population count among the cities in the area, and there was a diverse range of people within the city. There was a Master Teacher Pavilion within the city, which might make such a choice of location appear risky, but sometimes, it was the most obvious location that one was likely to overlook. After all, which sane person would dare loiter right beneath the nose of the Master Teacher Pavilion when an arrest warrant had been issued on him? Thus, the Master-Teacher Pavilion would not devote too much of its manpower searching the Empire Alliance city either. Inform the Master-Teacher Pavilion right away and tell them that we have found some traces of Zhang Xian in the Empire Alliance city. Regardless of whether he's there or not, let's have the Master-Teacher Pavilion first conduct a thorough search throughout the city. Zhang Wuheng harumphed coldly. I'll inform them right away. Yu Ruoxi nodded. While they could conduct the search, they did not have the legitimacy and manpower of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, so their efficiency was bound to be much lower. All that was left to do was bide their time in the Empire Alliance city. Once Zhang Xian was found, they would swoop right in and apprehend him. Zhang Xian's heart jolted in horror. His first instinct was to escape, but he forced himself to remain calm. From the looks of it, it seemed like the other party had seen through his disguise from the start. The fact that the other party had not made a move yet, and instead chose to converse with him calmly showed that he bore no ill will. On top of that, he had been trying to assess the other party's strength, but as if staring into the abyss, he found himself unable to see the bottom of the other party's cultivation. It was questionable whether he would really be able to escape, or not even if he tried. Rather than jumping into action, it seemed wiser for him to sound out the other party's aim first. While Zhang Xian was in a state of utter shock, the elder standing opposite of him was also completely astounded. He could tell with his eye of discernment that the person standing opposite to him was only in his early 20s, but the young man's state of mind was so deep that even he was unable to see through him. It was no wonder that no one had been able to see through the young man's impersonation for so long. More importantly, despite knowing who he was, the young man was still able to remain perfectly calm, not showing the slightest hint of fluster at all. Just from that, his state of mind had already surpassed all master teachers that he knew of. There was a short moment of silence before Zhang Xian remarked, "I have always taken pride in my disguise ability. If Yang sure doesn't mind sharing, I am interested to know how you managed to see through me." He would not be so arrogant as to actually think that his disguise was impeccable, but with his soul depth of 29.1, which was on par with top 9-star master teachers, and the extraordinary flexibility of his body, not even Elder Chu and the others had been able to see through him. Just what kind of fatal opening was there in his disguise that made Yang Shi so certain that he was Zhang Xian? Your disguise was remarkable, from your outer appearance down to the aura of your soul. There's no way I could have guessed it was you. The only reason I was so certain is because of the Sanctum Head token in your possession, Yang Shi replied. Sanctum Head token? Zhang Xian was stunned, not expecting to hear such an answer. He quickly flicked his wrist and took out his Sanctum Head token. After using it to defend against the attack from Elder Chu back at the Glacier Plain Court, he had placed it back into his storage ring, and he had not taken it out since then. Who could have thought that it would actually become the crux for Yang Shi to find him? That's right. The Sanctum Head token is an artifact that Sage Kuei, together with a group of powerful master teachers, painstakingly forged. While it isn't the strongest weapon in the world, it harnesses the wills of the predecessors and the scholarly aura of the Sanctum of Sages. Even if you store it in your storage ring, you still can't fully conceal the aura it emanates. It's due to this property of the Sanctum Head token that even with the untimely deaths of the preceding Sanctum Heads, the Sanctum of Sages was still able to eventually retrieve the Sanctum Head token without fail. Yang Shi replied with a smile. Zhang Xian nodded in realization. The Sanctum Head token could be considered an insignia of authority and nobility for the Sanctum of Sages. Perhaps in a bid to sustain the legacy of the token, Sage Kuei and the others had devised some method that would allow the top echelons of the Sanctum of Sages and Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters to trace the whereabouts of the Sanctum Head token. And it was using such a method that Yang Shi had been able to find his whereabouts and confirm his identity. Since Yang Shi has found me, do you intend to apprehend me? Zhang Xian asked. I haven't returned to the Master Teacher Pavilion for a very long time, and the decrees they issue have nothing to do with me. The reason I came looking for you is solely out of curiosity. A person as talented as you couldn't have just appeared out of nowhere. I'm interested to find out what lineage you are from, and whom your teacher is. Yang Shi replied with a smile. Along the way, he had carefully browsed through Zhang Xian's records. The young man had claimed to be his student, but he knew very well that he had never met the young man before, let alone imparted any knowledge to him. He knew all of the 9-star master teacher on the master teacher continent, but he did not think that any of them wielded the ability to raise such a formidable student. In fact, even the student whom he had personally groomed, Feng Zi, was nothing compared to the young man standing before him. He wanted to find out just whom the person behind Zhang Xian was. This, Zhang Xian shook his head and replied, I'll be frank with you. I have never acknowledged a teacher before. Before others, he could still claim that his teacher was Yang Xian, but with the person in question standing right in front of him, such lies no longer held any meaning. You have never acknowledged any teacher before? Yang Shi's smile collapsed into a look of disbelief. How could that be possible? I have looked through your records, and you were just an ordinary cultivator in the Tianxian kingdom. Within a single year, you have already grasped the strength of the Saint 8 Dan Dimension Sundering Realm. How could you grow so quickly without the guidance of a teacher? Be it in terms of cultivation or supporting occupations, the young man before him seemed to grasp everything in an instant. Even when it came to his cultivation, everything seemed to bank on his whims. He could achieve breakthroughs as and when he liked, as if the concept of bottlenecks did not apply to him. As unbelievable as it seemed, it might still have been possible if he did have a formidable teacher to guide him along. However, to achieve all of that by himself, this was something that even Yang Shi himself was unable to believe. One must know that even the legendary Kong Shi had not grown at this breakneck speed either. I don't know why, but be it cultivation or supporting occupations, I'm able to grasp and master everything in an instant. There's nothing I can do about how talented I am. Zhang Xian replied with a helpless edge to his voice. He could not possibly talk about the Library of Heaven's Path, so he could only attribute everything to his own aptitude. There should have been individuals who were so monstrously talented that they could not be defined using common sense in history, such as the young prodigy of the Zhang clan. Did they not say that he was already a Saint Realm expert at birth? Considering how there were people in the world who were born as saints, surely his talent of mastering everything in an instant was nothing to gawk at. This, Yang Shi frowned. In his lifetime, he had met plenty of prodigies, and there were indeed those who possessed such talent too. The little princess of the Luo clan was one such example, but none of them were as overpowered as this. Besides, the Luo clan's resources were there for all to see. It was due to the massive influx of resources, and this was including the guidance of 9-star master teachers, that she had been able to grow that quickly. On the other hand, the young man before him was an unaffiliated cultivator, and yet, he was actually growing at a rate faster than the little princess. There was no way that such a thing could be achieved if he did not have a teacher. Furthermore, based on what he had heard, the young man also wielded many extraordinary means as well, such as taming the lightning tribulation into subservience. Even he was incapable of pulling something as ludicrous as that off. Yang Shi hesitated for a moment before flicking out a jade token and passing it over. I have a battle technique here. It's a finger art that Feng Zi was unable to achieve major accomplishment in despite having cultivated it for 3 years. Since you possess such talents, may I request that you try learning it so as to convince me that you really don't have a teacher? Since the young man had claimed that he was able to master everything swiftly, there was a very simple method to verify this claim. If the young man was really able to master the finger art swiftly, that would mean that there was some truth to his words. A finger art? Zhang Xian took the jade token and swiftly browsed through it, severing Yang finger. It was a Saint Pinnacle battle technique that wielded unparalleled might. If used well in a battle, it could easily serve as a trump card in dire situations. Fortunately, I do have quite a few finger arts in the Library of Heaven's Path. Compile. Knowing that Yang Shi was testing him, and he would clear this test as long as he could master the finger art, Zhang Xian did not hesitate to collect the severing Yang finger into the Library of Heaven's Path. After which, He compiled it together with the finger arts that he had collected back in the Combat Master Hall. The severing yang finger was a little similar to the Grand Constellation finger, which he had practiced back then. Its crux lay in focusing one's strength at a single point and releasing it all at once. Soon, a new book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Zhang Xian quickly flipped it open and browsed through it. Just as he had expected, the compiled finger art was devoid of flaws. With a touch, the knowledge regarding the perfected severing yang finger flowed into his head. This finger art of mine is a little too heavy on its killing intent, but it's still a formidable weapon when dealing with otherworldly demons, Yang Shi said. This finger art allows one to sever the vitality and longevity of one's opponent, but due to its might, it also inflicts a certain degree of damage on the practitioner as well. One must be able to concentrate one's strength, mind, spirit, and will together in order to execute it perfectly. I'll give you 3 days to learn this skill. If you are able to reach minor accomplishment within 3 days without my guidance, I'll believe that you possess the capability to have reached your current altitude without a teacher to guide you along. 3 days? There's no need for that. Zhang Xian opened his eyes and looked at Yang Xian. I am already done learning it. You are already done learning it. Yang Shi's eyebrows shot up, thinking that he might have heard wrongly. You have only grabbed the jade token, and nothing else. Heck, you didn't even infuse your junqi into it to browse through its contents. And yet, you are telling me that you are already done learning it? Furthermore, the severing yang finger is complex and hard to grasp. Even when I came into contact with it the first time, it took an entire hour before I was able to finish reading through the manual and comprehend it. Yet, right after grabbing hold of the jade token, you are telling me that you have already mastered it? Surely you jest. Since it's your battle technique, you can lower your cultivation and try it out, Zhang Xian said with a smile. You should be able to tell whether I am lying or not once we trade blows. Very well then. Seeing how confident the young man before him was, seemingly not fearing his identity or strength at all, Yang Shi nodded. The young man was right. The best way to test a cultivator's mastery of his battle technique was to trade blows with him. If the young man was able to execute it fluidly in the midst of battle, that would mean that he had truly mastered the technique. Boom! Yang Shi took in a deep breath, and the next moment, his cultivation plummeted to the same level as Zhang Xian, Dimension Sundering Realm Primary Stage. I'm going to make my move now. Yang Shi raised his forefinger and middle finger, gathering a rotating surge of energy at the tip of his fingers. In an instant, the surge of energy had already gathered together in a cataclysmic storm. Devastating might roared furiously from the midst of the storm, on the verge of tearing the surrounding space into shreds. Simply replying with a nod, Zhang Xian raised his finger casually and lightly tapped the space in front of him. His finger did not wield the power of the storm, unlike Yang Xian's, and his movements were slow as if an old ox plowing the fields. Yang Shi was intending to say that he had executed the finger art incorrectly, but when he saw the tip of the finger pointed at him, his eyes narrowed in alarm. In that moment, he could not even spare a shred of his attention toward speaking anymore. He swiftly focused the crippling energy that he had gathered together, and shot it forward to defend against Zhang Xian's finger art. Boom! As the two fingers collided, the storm that had gathered abruptly vanished without a trace. Following which, Yang Shi felt an enormous force striking him head-on, forcing him to retreat uncontrollably. He swiftly released the seal on his cultivation, and only when he had recovered up to Dimension Sundering Realm Pinnacle did he finally regain his balance. Suppressing the turbulence in his junqi, Yang Shi was utterly shocked by what had just happened. At first glance, the finger art that the young man had executed bore no resemblance to the severing yang finger at all. However, the moment that the finger art struck him, it had suddenly made the full transformation into the severing yang finger. While he had altered the execution of the severing yang finger, the might of the finger art did not weaken in the least. On the contrary, it had grown almost 2 times stronger. Furthermore, the intent of the finger art was on point as well. He could feel the force of the finger consuming his entire body, nearly severing the Jinqi in his body into half. This was a level of power that even he did not possess despite having mastered the severing yang finger. "Are you injured?" Zhang Xian asked sheepishly. "I'm fine," Yang Shi replied. Unable to hold himself back anymore, he asked. "You didn't just master the severing yang finger. You have even improved it as well, right?" Through the previous clash, it was apparent that the young man had not only mastered the severing yang finger, but even managed to improve it. How in the world did he do it? To do all of that within just a few minutes. Even when he was seeing it with his own eyes, he still felt as if he was dreaming. Was it really possible for someone to be so formidable in the world? In the first place, to design a battle technique solely for the sake of killing isn't optimal. The purpose of battle techniques is to allow a cultivator to better utilize their Jinqi, exerting force that would have otherwise been impossible, Zhang Xian explained. The severing yang finger is too domineering, placing it at disharmony with the world. Thus, I altered it a little so as to place the focus on severing the enemy's Jinqi instead. This way, not only will it not result in unnecessary bloodshed, it will also be able to let the opponent realize that they are outmatched. The severing yang finger was indeed a formidable technique, but it was simply too demanding on a cultivator's Jinqi, spirit, mind and will. If the attack missed, the cultivator could end up creating an opening for the enemy to strike. But after compiling the severing yang finger with many other finger art manuals, Zhang Xian had managed to resolve the flaw. It's true that severing the opponent's Jinqi is a less violent way of subduing one's opponent and can avoid unnecessary bloodshed. But what if the enemy that you are facing is an otherworldly demon? Your act of mercy will not necessarily be reciprocated. Often, just the slightest difference in intent could bring one the greatest of calamities. Yang Shi said, while killing arts were at disharmony with the world, there was still a reason for their existence. One would not use it when fighting against fellow master teachers, but when facing the otherworldly demons, the slightest mercy could end up creating an opening for the other party to exploit, placing oneself and one's allies in danger. Such cases were simply too common. Back then, when he entered the subterranean gallery for the first time with his teacher, out of a moment of compassion for the enemy, he had given the enemy an opportunity to launch a counterattack. Eventually, his teacher had ended up being severely injured while trying to save him, nearly losing his life. He had spent a very long time regretting his indecisiveness back then. That incident had taught him a lesson that he would never forget. It was fine to have mercy when fighting a friend, but against one's enemies, one had to cast aside one's morals and be as ignoble as possible. Otherwise, the ones who would pay the price would not be the enemy. Indeed, you can't afford to go easy against the otherworldly demons. Zhang Xian nodded. If you agree with my point of view, why did you still diminish the destructive might of the severing yang finger? Yang Shi asked in bewilderment. If the young man understood his logic, it seemed counterintuitive for him to still choose to alter the battle technique into such a form. To be honest with you, I only used 30% of my strength in the fight earlier, so that I could exert and retract my strength freely. If I used my full strength, the might it commands is still not too bad. Zhang Xian replied with a smile. 30%. Yang Shi staggered on the spot, and he thought that his mind would blow up. You said that you only used 30% of your strength? Using just 30% of his strength, the young man had actually managed to push him back and force him to raise his cultivation to dimension, sundering realm pinnacle, before he was able to steady himself once more. Was the young man really serious about this? Indeed, a full might attack would be something like this. Zhang Xian nodded as he raised his finger once more. This time, the young man's movement was even slower. But for an instant, Yang Shi felt as if the entire world had collapsed on him. A feeling of despair swiftly crept its way into his mind, leaving him feeling as if he would be completely helpless no matter how he struggled. Kacha! Kacha! Not daring to hesitate in the least, Yang Shi quickly released the seal on his cultivation, and in an instant, his cultivation rose back up to Saint Nine Dan Macrocosm Ascendancy Realm, following which, he thrust his finger forth to face Zhang Xian's attack. Pung! The young man's strength surged toward him like a relentless tide, threatening to disintegrate his meridians and render him completely helpless. Once again, Yangshi was forced to retreat more than 12 steps back. His jinqi was jolted into turbulence under the impact, and he had to take deep breaths in order to calm himself down. His face was as pale as a sheet of paper, marked with utter disbelief. As one of the strongest experts in the world, even if he had suppressed his cultivation, the young man should not have been able to be a match for him. Yet, the young man actually overpowered him, using his move after learning it for just a couple minutes. That was too frightening. Were there really geniuses in the world who could grasp anything upon sight, and even alter it stronger in just moments? The strength isn't too bad, right? Zhang Xian asked with a smile. Yes. Calming down the turmoil he was undergoing inside, Yangshi exhaled deeply. With glowing eyes, he asked, "Since you don't have any teacher at the moment, will you consider taking me as your teacher?" The fact that the young man had claimed to be his teacher showed that the young man did have an interest in his lineage. He had still been able to remain calm about it in the past, but after witnessing the young man's unbelievable talent, his heart as a teacher immediately lit up into a passionate inferno. He could not even begin to imagine just how far the young man could go under his guidance. "You want me to accept me as your student?" "Indeed. As long as you agree to be my student, the master-teacher arrest warrant, the Zhang clan, and the Glacier Plain Court, I can help you resolve them all," Yangshi said with a smile. In the first place, even though the Zhang clan and the Glacier Plain Court had been humiliated by the matter, they had not lost any of their men due to that. Furthermore, Zhang Xian was the head of the Sanctum of Sages, so the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters would be lenient on him, especially considering the current circumstances. Thus, as long as he spoke up on Zhang Xian's behalf, in deference to his standing and power, this seemingly unresolvable issue could be resolved rather easily. At the very most, he would just have to bring Zhang Xian around to make more contributions, so as to strike off whatever misdeeds he had done in the past. As a Grand Elder of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, he believed in his appeal to others. As long as he proclaimed his interest in taking in a student, countless master's teachers would immediately rush over to him. Considering how he had even made a direct offer to Zhang Xian, he believed that the latter would not turn him down. Just as he thought that the young man would delightfully kneel down and acknowledge him as his teacher, the young man shook his head instead and said, "Yangshi, thank you for your high opinion of me, but I don't have any intention of acknowledging a teacher just yet." Having undergone 5 celestial master-teacher acknowledgement, his eyes were already set on higher grounds. Even if Kongshi offered to take him in as his disciple again, he might not necessarily agree to it, let alone Yangshi. Yangshi was stunned for a moment, before his eyes slowly widened in astonishment. "You do have a strong foundation, possessing unique insights into battle techniques and cultivation. Under normal circumstances, it's true that you wouldn't need a teacher. After all, you have already found your own way of cultivation, and it would be meaningless for you to forcefully adopt another person's lineage." That being said, the Master-Teacher Pavilion still heavily emphasizes the idea of lineage. With a good teacher, your standing in the Master-Teacher Pavilion could be increased significantly, thus bringing you greater convenience in whatever you intend to do in the future. Furthermore, beyond St. Nine Dan, there won't be any predecessors whose path you can emulate. Without a teacher to guide you along, there's a high chance that you might accidentally head down the wrong path, and that could pose to be deadly. There won't be any predecessors whose path I can emulate. Zhang Xian turned to look at Yangshi with a doubtful look in his eyes. As he had not raised his cultivation or master-teacher rank to the corresponding level yet, he had not been able to acquire any news regarding the affairs of 9-star master-teachers. As such, he was completely oblivious to what lay beyond St. Nine Dan, and how such a level of cultivation could be achieved. Becoming a 9-star master-teacher isn't just about one's cultivation or soul depth. More than that, one must find their own philosophy of education and achieve a certain level of accomplishment in the field of teaching. Take Kongshi, for example. The philosophies that he left behind include teaching without discrimination, individualized impartation of knowledge, cultivating a passion toward learning, wholesome education, and so on. The beliefs that he left behind have lasted through the ages, inspiring generation after generation of teachers. Not only so, one of the core requirements to becoming a 9-star master teacher is to achieve a breakthrough beyond Saint 9 Dan. But it is no easy feat to do so at all. Even I had to tread carefully as if walking on thin ice, fearing that the slightest mistake would lead to my downfall. It's during times like this that the guidance of a teacher plays a crucial role. If you simply rely on fumbling your way through, it'll be difficult for you to get far. Yang Shi said with a shake of his head. Cultivation is a struggle against the heavens, so it's bound to be fraught with difficulties. However, knowing that Yang Shi bore good intentions at heart, Zhang Xian pondered deeply for a moment, seemingly deciding on an important decision. A moment later, he exhaled deeply before walking up to Yang Shi and saying, Yang Shi, please take a look at this. After which, Zhang Xian tapped his finger forward, and a surge of heaven's pathshenqi slowly gathered at the tip of his finger. At the same time, a unique aura was slowly being released from his body, pushing toward the elder. Yang Shi was initially a little perplexed over what Zhang Xian was going to do, but upon sensing the aura that the young man emanating, he hurriedly retreated 2 steps as his eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. His finger trembled nonstop as a furious tempest broke out in his heart. Why you are? Zhang Xian nodded silently. But, no wonder. Yang Shi took a deep breath before conducting a solemn, proper bow toward Zhang Xian. He felt light on his feet, almost as if he was floating on cloud. The situation was simply too unbelievable to him. It was no wonder the other party was unwilling to be his student. It turned out that he was a celestial master teacher, having the acknowledgement of the world. It would be no exaggeration to say that he was the disciple of the very world itself. In terms of standing, the young man before him could be said to be on par with even Kong Shi. Putting him aside, even if Kong Shi was reincarnated, he might still be unqualified to take the young man before him in as his student. Seeing that Yang Shi understood what was going on, Zhang Xian clasped his fist and explained, You should also understand how astounding my identity is. I know that revealing my identity could help me out of the quandary I am currently in, but it would surely draw the frenzied aggression of the otherworldly demonic tribe. I think it would be utterly foolish to place my life in the hands of another, so until I am powerful enough to protect myself, I don't intend to reveal my true identity. It's also for that reason that I claim to be your student, and used it as a cover to rationalize my accomplishments. I hope for your understanding for using your name without your consent. Back then, when he first impersonated Yang Shi, he had been unaware of the other party's existence. Perhaps this was the path that destiny was veering him toward. Since things had already worked out this way, he might as well just play along with it. This way, he would also be able to justify why he had chosen to impersonate Yang Shi in the first place. It's my honor. Yang Shi nodded with a dazed look on his face, having yet to recover from the shocking revelation. It was his utmost fortune to have the celestial master teacher claiming to be his disciple. He would have never dared imagine such a thing happening otherwise. I guess that's to be expected. Who else other than the celestial master teacher could wield such tremendous abilities? It took Yang Shi a long moment of rumination before he was able to regain himself. It was no wonder the young man had been able to pull off so many inconceivable feats, such as commanding the lightning tribulation. In his lifetime, Yang Shi had seen plenty of geniuses, but none of them could match up to even a tenth of Zhang Xian's capabilities. His direct disciple Feng Zi was one such example. In the eyes of others, he was a hard-to-come-by genius who possessed unparalleled talent, and he could very well join the upper echelons of the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters in the future. However, when compared to the young man before him, the difference between the two of them was so great that he could not bear to look at his direct disciple anymore. They were simply on 2 entirely different levels. Yang Shi, the implications concerning a celestial master teacher are too great, so I ask of you to keep this matter a secret, said Zhang Xian as he clasped his fist. Don't worry, I won't speak of this matter to another soul, Yang Shi replied with a nod. The term celestial master teacher had come to take on too great a significance throughout the entire world. If it became known that Zhang Xian was the celestial master teacher, it would raise a huge commotion, such that even the master teacher pavilion headquarters would be rattled at its core. At the same time, the otherworldly demonic tribe would also launch an all-out assault against mankind, not caring about the damage that they would sustain as a result of their actions, just so that they could prevent another Kong Shi from rising among the humans. This would place mankind in grave danger, and the situation could very well run out of control. You have my gratitude. Zhang Xian clasped his fist. Even though this was the first time that he had met Yang Shi, for some inexplicable reason, he felt that the latter was someone whom he could trust and rely on, which was also the reason he had chosen to reveal his identity to Yang Shi in the first place. The greater the number of people who knew of his identity, the higher the risk that the news would leak out. As such, he could not afford to have the entire Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters learning of his identity as a celestial master teacher. But at the same time, he also understood the unfavorable situation that he was in. If he could just bring Yang Shi over to his side and have the latter mediate on his behalf, this matter could very well be resolved peacefully, without him having to expose his identity to too many people. There's no need to stand on ceremony. This is part of my duty as a master teacher. At this point, Yang Shi turned a serious gaze to Zhang Xian as he continued speaking. You are a celestial master teacher, and I understand that I don't have the qualifications to take you in as my student. However, without exposing that you are the celestial master teacher, or having you come under any lineages, I'm afraid that it'll still be hard for me to convince the Master Teacher Pavilion to get off your back. Hard? Zhang Xian frowned. He knew that the person standing right before him was the first Grand Elder of the Master Teacher Pavilion. Surely, with the other party's esteemed standing, he would be able to resolve this matter easily. Why would it be hard for him? You have had quite a few clashes with the Master Teacher Pavilion, so I believe that you should be able to tell that the current Master Teacher Pavilion is no longer what it used to be, Yang Shi said with a deep sigh of resignation. Zhang Xian blinked, not expecting to hear such words from Yang Shi. The purpose behind the founding of the Master Teacher Pavilion was to empower mankind and grant it the strength required to fend off any external threats. Anything aside from its primary purpose, master teachers would strive not to get involved with, or even pay attention to at all. After Kong Shi's passing, most of the predecessors continued to embrace such a tradition. Alas, all men have ambitions and desires. The allure of power corrupts them so. Woefulness rippled in Yang Shi's eyes as he shook his head bitterly, seemingly lamenting the vicissitudes of life. The effects of power appear benign in the short run, but those who have enjoyed it for far too long fear having it stripped from their hands, and they will do anything to preserve their grip on power. Such is the case with the current Master Teacher Pavilion. They feel that the scars on their bodies and the blood that they have shed make them the rightful leaders of the Master Teacher continent, and there's no human and no power who is worthy of refuting their contribution to the world. They feel that the Master Teacher Pavilion deserves the very prestige that it's accorded, and anyone who shows them any disrespect is contemptible. It's a true pity that they have already lost sight of the very people who granted them their power in the first place. Without humans, who would care about whatever sacrifices the master teachers have made? I simply couldn't stand such snobbishness. So, I chose to spend my days roaming outside, rarely returning to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Zhang Xian was stunned for a moment before he slowly shook his head. He had encountered many different master teachers on his journey. He had met master teachers who addressed others humbly and amiably regardless of their ranking, as well as those who worked hard to ensure that their students matured to become upstanding and capable individuals in the future. At the same time, there were also master teachers who were self-important and abused their power for their own satisfaction, making them no different from tyrants. The Master Teacher Pavilion was built with good intentions at heart, but as time passed, its primary purpose had inevitably dulled. Power placed one in a lofty position and would corrupt one's heart. Not even master teachers were infallible to that. The arrest warrant that the Master Teacher Pavilion has placed on you is one such example. Yang shook his head and sighed. I have checked your records, and on top of your outstanding talent, you have also made commendable contributions to mankind. Under normal circumstances, the stand that the Master Teacher Pavilion would take should be reconciliatory, working to mediate in the conflict between you and the other powers. However, your ability to control the lightning tribulation is simply too attractive for them to miss out on. To make matters worse, the fact that you don't have a lineage means that they can force you to spit out your secret arts without fearing retribution from those in your lineage. With so many people desiring to obtain your secret arts, it's no wonder they have chosen such an extreme approach this time around. Currently, the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters is split into several factions, each of them keeping their secret arts and skills under wraps, aiming to outdo the other factions instead of striving for collective growth. Long gone are the days when master teachers are truly open with one another, sharing their insights and knowledge unreservedly with one another. As long as a faction obtains your secret arts, they will be able to surpass the other factions and suppress them, thus gaining dominant power in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Kong Shi left the Master Teacher Pavilion behind in order to strengthen mankind. But ultimately, even his teachings aren't able to overcome the fundamental nature of humans. Damn. Indeed, Zhang Xian sighed. No matter how good a system Kong Shi put in place, the humans who manage the system are ultimately still fallible. In the early years of the Master Teacher Pavilion, master teachers had sought not power or recognition. They had believed that their responsibility lay in the betterment of mankind, and they had never hesitated to share their knowledge with others, so as to achieve that goal. But tens of thousands of years had passed since, and mankind had progressed to a stage of stability and prosperity. There was no longer any urgent threat for mankind to unite against, so they had turned their sights inward and begun fighting for power instead, forgetting their initial purpose. Sometimes, even the character of the most pinnacle master teacher might not compare with the lowest one-star master teacher. At the very least, the lowest one-star master teachers had not been corrupted by power and authority yet. For the past tens of thousands of years, there has been a pre-established cap on how high one's cultivation can go, so most people lose their motivation to continue cultivating once they reach that perceived cap. Thus, they sought new ways to allow them to live grander and more pompously instead. Yang Shi heaved yet another dejected sigh. The problem with the Master Teacher Pavilion was an intrinsic issue, and the corruption had already permeated right into the core of the organization. It was not something that he alone could resolve. Much of the Master Teacher Pavilion's virtue has eroded over the past tens of thousands of years. But even though the master teachers nowadays have already forgotten the lofty ideals that they once embraced, they remain unrelenting in dealing with the otherworldly demons and protecting mankind. Zhang Xian noted with a nod. Perhaps it was in view of this that the preceding Deputy Pavilion Masters thought little of the ailments that the Master Teacher Pavilion is suffering from. While power had caused the nature of the Master Teacher Pavilion to change, as long as they remained united when dealing with the otherworldly demonic tribe, it would show that the master teachers had not truly cast away their values and purpose yet. Ever since Kong Shi left us so, Great Sage has been the highest realm that any cultivator could reach. No one has been able to overcome the final hurdle to reach the level of the ancient sages. However, your very emergence signifies a change in the eras. As a celestial master teacher, I believe that you'll be able to lead mankind through its current threats and usher in another era of prosperity. Yang Shi exclaimed excitedly. The preceding generations of Deputy Pavilion Masters had been lacking in legitimacy and prestige, so they had not been able to garner the support of everyone in the Master Teacher Pavilion. However, things would be different for the Celestial Master Teacher. Great Sage, Zhang Xian asked with a frown. Above Saint Nine Dan lies the realm of Great Sage, but unlike the Saint Realm, Great Sage only consists of 4 dawn. Beyond Great Sage lies Ancient Sage, which is also the level that Qiu Wu, Bo Shang, and the other disciples of Kong Shi reached. However, in the dozens of millenniums since the passing of Kong Shi, no one has been able to achieve a breakthrough to that level, Yang Shi replied. This, Zhang Xian's heart jolted in astonishment. All along, he had thought that ancient sage was just a manner of addressing the predecessors in the ancient era. But who could have thought that it would actually be the name of a whole cultivation realm? What realm did Kong Shi reach? Zhang Xian could not help but ask out of curiosity, since his subordinates and disciples had all reached the level of ancient sage. As the #1 expert of all mankind, and the founder of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, just how powerful could he have been? Kong Shi reached an unfathomable level, far beyond our means to speculate, Yang Shi said as he gazed into the distance deeply. At his peak, Kong Shi had reached a level that no man had ever reached. No one could tell how powerful he was, or taking a step back. Even if someone knew how powerful he was, it was not something that young juniors like them were qualified to look into. After all that has been said and done, I believe that you should have gained some understanding of the current Master-Teacher Pavilion. If we don't expose your identity as a celestial Master-Teacher, you will need another identity to increase your standing, so that others won't doubt you so. Otherwise, your feat of rising through the ranks within the span of a single year, and successfully crashing 2 different Master-Teacher Pavilions, will be simply too eye-catching. Together with the huge uproar this time around, I fear that it will be hard to resolve this matter peacefully. Yang Shi said. This, Zhang Xian fell silent. There was some truth in what Yang Shi had said. If the majority of the Master Teachers in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters wanted to lay their hands on Zhang Xian, even with Yang Xian's influence as the first Grand Elder, it would still be difficult for him to overthrow a verdict that had the approval of the majority. No matter how much prestige Yang Shi wielded in the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters, the one who was truly in power and had the right to make the final call was still the Deputy Pavilion Master. Unless Zhang Xian had a sufficiently high standing that could induce the deference of those 9-star Master Teachers, it would be difficult for Yang Shi to gather sufficient momentum to stop the arrest warrant. I don't have the right to accept you as my student, but I could take you into my lineage in the stead of my teacher. This way, you could assume the identity of my senior in front of others. My teacher has already passed on, so even if others question your identity, as long as I insist on it, there will be nothing that they can say. Of course, this is just an empty title to uphold in front of others. After all, even my teacher has no right to take you in as his student. Yang Shi revealed his thoughts. So, I'd become your senior? Hearing those words, Zhang Xian scratched his head in embarrassment. But would you really be fine being my junior? Celestial Master Teachers are individuals who can stand on equal grounds as Kong Shi. If not for fear that it would be too shocking to others, I would have liked to acknowledge you as my teacher. Having you as my senior can already a huge honor in itself. Yang Shi hurriedly said. As the first Grand Elder, there were very few who could match his standing on the Master-Teacher continent. However, compared to the Celestial Master-Teacher, even his standing paled too much in comparison. To act as Zhang Xian's junior and address him as his senior could already be considered insubordination, and it left him feeling a little jittery inside. After a moment of contemplation, knowing that there was no other way around it, Zhang Xian very reluctantly nodded and said, I understand. Let's go with that then, Junior Yang Xian. Senior Zhang. Yang Shi heaved a sigh of relief. It sure was a bizarre turn of events. He had been intending to take the other party as his student, but it had eventually ended up with him finding himself a senior instead. Nevertheless, he was still delighted by the outcome. With the emergence of the Celestial Master Teacher, the disjointed Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters would finally come to be united as one. Mankind would grow stronger and stronger, and there would be no need to fear the crises that lay ahead of them anymore. Zhang Xian suddenly recalled the other matter he had at hand, so he asked, Junior, I heard that you once helped a person reconstruct their meridians. May I know if that's true? Previously, the guild leader had said that Yang Shi had once successfully helped a cultivator replace their meridians. Since the person in question was standing right in front of him, it was a good opportunity to inquire about the matter. There was indeed such a matter. Yangsher nodded in response. The reconstruction of meridians is a very complicated process, involving the blood reincarnation of the ancient sages. I had to browse through many ancient manuals before I was able to a feasible method, Yangsher said. Blood reincarnation? Zhang Xian asked. Noting Zhang Xian's confusion at the term, Yangsher explained. After making the breakthrough to ancient sage, one will be able to achieve blood reincarnation. In other words, as long as the cultivator retains a single droplet of their blood, there would be a way for them to come back to life. This, Zhang Xian's heart jolted in astonishment. Vicious had reached the level of blood reincarnation as well. Because of that, he had been able to come back to life despite having his body shredded into innumerable pieces. That being said, it was important to note that there was still a fundamental difference in the lifespan of humans and otherworldly demons. The otherworldly demonic tribe was blessed with inherent longevity, so an ancient sage human cultivator would not even come close to living as long as an ancient sage otherworldly demon. As such, even if traces of ancient sage human cultivators were found, it would be impossible to revive them anymore. Nevertheless, if ancient sages were able to revive from mere droplets of blood, surely reconstructing meridians would be a piece of cake for them. The meridians of my student over here, Xiaoya, have collapsed completely. I wish to restore her meridians so that she can continue cultivating. Do you have any way that I can possibly do so? Zhang Xian asked. Her meridians have collapsed completely? Astonished, Yangsher quickly turned his gaze upon the young lady. He did not think that the young lady with a healthy glow on her face would be afflicted with such a severe condition. A moment later, he nodded grimly and said, her meridians have indeed collapsed entirely. I fear that it'll be extremely difficult for her to recover to her former state. Extremely difficult? Zhang Xian frowned. Indeed, the person whom I helped reconstruct his meridians had sustained some tears in his meridians as a result of old age, so all I had to do back then was connect them together. On the other hand, Xiaoya's meridians have collapsed entirely, leaving nary a trace at all. That means that you will have to reconstruct her meridians from scratch, and I fear that she won't be able to take the strain that will be placed on her during the reconstruction process, given her current weakened state. Yangsher shook his head. If we use my method on her, the chances of success will be exceedingly slim. What's the method that you used to reconstruct meridians? Zhang Xian asked. I want to see if I can come up with an alternative method that will be feasible on her. While Yang Xian felt that the chances of success were slim, the same might not necessarily apply for Zhang Xian. Possessing the Library of Heaven's Path, he would be able to resolve any flaws in Yang Xian's meridian reconstruction technique and uncover the most feasible and correct method to do so. That should increase the chances of success considerably. The theory behind my meridian reconstruction technique is rather simple. I extracted the meridians from high-tier saint beasts and used a unique method to connect them with the meridians of the patient's body. As the meridians of most saint beasts are similar in terms of flexibility to those of humans, while it might not be as easy to use, it should still suffice. Yangsher said, You used the meridians of high-tier saint beasts? Zhang Xian frowned. In a sense, this was similar to the act of organ transplant from his previous life. Saint beasts also differ in their constitutions as well, so their meridians should be different from one another. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before raising a doubt. I don't think that it would be viable to use the meridians from any saint beasts, right? Just like how it was possible for a body to reject a transplanted organ, the same problem should apply to meridian transplants. Of course, the saint beast selected should possess a similar constitution to the patient. Your student possesses the purine body, but saint beasts of the purine attribute are nearly non-existent. That's also the reason I said that it would extremely difficult, or perhaps even impossible. Yangsher shook his head. Zhang Xian fell silent. It would be difficult to find even a human with purine body, let alone a saint beast. This was indeed not a viable solution. Hearing the conversation of the duo, Zhaoye interjected for the very first time with a smile. Teacher, I'm fine with this. If I can't recover from my condition, I have no qualms with living as an ordinary human for the rest of my life. She had seen how far her teacher had gone for her. If it still did not work out despite that, perhaps this was just the path that fate had chosen for her. There was no need to force the impossible. Rest assured, since I have said that I'll cure you, I will definitely pull it off, Zhang Xian said with a confident wave of his hand before turning his gaze back to Yang Shi. Other than this, are there any other feasible solutions? Yang Shi paused for a moment before saying, it's indeed not too easy to find beasts of the pure yin attribute. Alternatively, it might be possible to replace her meridians using plants. Plants? That's right. Plants are more adaptable to their surroundings, especially those of neutral attributes, thus making them suitable to be molded into meridians. Unfortunately, most plants have a cap to their strength, and that means that the future accomplishments of the cultivator will be limited as well, Yang Shi explained. Even the formidable millennium-old herbs could not come close to comparing with the vitality of saint beasts. While they could be used to reconstruct one's meridians, that could only be considered a mediocre solution, used only when there were no other alternatives available. This was because the limits of the plants would spell the limits of the cultivator, thus preventing the cultivator from reaching greater heights. You're right. Unless the plant is extremely high tier, it won't work out well. However, it's no easy feat to find such plants. Just as Zhang Xian was in a state of loss, a thought suddenly surfaced in his mind, and he slapped his forehead in realization. The vine of the Dongshu gourd. The vine of the Dongshu gourd was an artifact that could absorb even the violent energy of a lightning tribulation. On top of that, it harnessed the power of space, such that in terms of prowess, it would not pale in comparison to a Saint 8 Dan cultivator. There was no doubt that it would serve as a much better meridian compared to a Saint Beasts. After all, not even Saint Beasts would dare devour lightning. With such a thought in mind, Zhang Xian flicked his wrist, and the vine immediately appeared in his hand. He hurriedly brought it toward Yang Shi and asked, Junior, can you have a look to see if this will do? Yang Shi quickly turned his gaze over, and it took only a few seconds for his face to warp with shock. What is this plant? Astonishingly, he could not tell what it was even with his eye of discernment. It's the vine of a Dongshu gourd, Zhang Xian explained. Dongshu gourd? Yang Shi pondered for a moment before shaking his head. No, that's not right. I have seen a Dongshu gourd before, and its vine isn't like that. The one that you have should have been nourished by a spirit vein for at least several dozen millenniums. And on top of that, it seems to harness the power of space and lightning. Zhang Xian blinked before explaining. The anomaly might be due to this vine absorbing plenty of lightning energy. No, that isn't it. As powerful as the Dongshu gourd is, it still flees as far as it can in the face of lightning. After all, that's retribution from the heavens. It shouldn't be possible for it to absorb any lightning energy. Yang Shi refuted Zhang Xian's words. Let's just put that aside for the moment. Is this vine suitable for replacing my students' meridians? Zhang Xian asked. The Dongshu gourd that he had was left behind by ancient sage Qiu Wu. It had slipped right into his dantian shortly after its appearance, refusing to leave no matter what Zhang Xian did. From such a perspective, there was indeed something rather bizarre about it. However, this was not the time to look into it. At this point, Zhang Xian was only interested in knowing if he could use the vine to reconstruct Zhaoye's meridians and cure her. Considering that it harnesses the power of space and lightning, it's indeed the ideal artifact to use to replace one's meridians. Yang Shi examined the vine closely, and his eyes lit up in agitation. If Zhaoye's meridians are reconstructed using this vine, her cultivation will surely be brought to new heights. In the future, she might even be able to push for a breakthrough to ancient sage. The vine in front of him harnessed incredible energy and properties, such that even he had some trouble trying to discern it. If it was used to reconstruct Zhaoye's meridians, she would surely be able to drive her Jinqi much easier and more efficiently. Not only so, Her Jinqi capacity would also be enhanced to an unbelievable level. That's great. Hearing that it was a viable option to use as Zhaoye's meridians, and it would benefit her cultivation as well, Zhang Xian could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Let me take a look at your meridian reconstruction technique, Zhang Xian requested. Here you go. Yang Shi flicked his wrist and passed a jade token over. Placing his finger lightly on the jade token, the content within it swiftly surfaced in his head. The next moment, Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. The method used by the other party was indeed able to reconstruct a cultivator's meridians, but there was a fatal flaw in it. It was too violent. Regardless of whether the reconstruction process was a success or not, it would place a great strain on the cultivator's body. In a sense, this was also similar to the organ transplant process in his previous life. Even if the organ transplanted was a match, the process was still highly dangerous and taxing on the patient. Furthermore, meridians were pathways linking the various parts of the body together. Just a single mistake in the meridian pathway could lead to unimaginable outcomes. Junior, do you have any books regarding meridian reconstruction with you? Zhang Xian asked. I need as many of them as possible. After reading through the book that Yang Shi had passed to him, Zhang Xian could tell that given the current limits of his knowledge, it would be difficult for him to find a feasible method to resolve the flaw in the short run. Given that Yang Shi had researched the topic for quite some time, even maintaining correspondence with the head of the Blacksmith Guild headquarters, in order to trade insights regarding the issue, he likely had plenty of resources regarding this topic. I do have quite a few books on it. Back then, I used my influence in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters to gather everything on the topic that I could find for several years. However, it turns out that most of them are just thoughtless blabber, beautiful in theory but infeasible in practice. Yang Shi shook his head as he flicked his wrist, and a huge pile of ancient books materialized before him. Back then, in order to reconnect his close friend's meridians, he had spent quite a lot of time browsing through all of the books that he could lay his hands on regarding the topic. To date, he had accumulated around 9,000 of them, but it was a pity that most of them were not of much use. It's fine. I'll just take a quick look and get whatever's useful from them, Zhang Xian said as he swept his eyes across the huge pile of books. The next moment, all of them materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. Compile, Zhang Xian willed as he merged the 9,000 or so books together with the Meridian Reconstruction Technique Manual that Yang Shi had made previously. Soon a brand new Meridian Reconstruction Technique Manual was formed. Zhang Xian anxiously flipped it open to take a look, only to shake his head in disappointment once more. The compiled Meridian Reconstruction Technique was much simpler than the one that Yang Shi had come up with, but there were still plenty of flaws in it. The Meridian Reconstruction process was still fraught with danger, and the slightest mistake could spell Zhaoye's death. The main issue is that Zhaoye is too weak after losing her cultivation entirely. Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in distress. The meridian network of a human was simply too complicated. Had Zhaoye's cultivation not dissipated, he could still have given it a try. However, after what had happened, she was already no different from an ordinary mortal. And in contrast to that, the vine of the Dongshu gourd was simply too strong. If some mishap occurred in the reconstruction phase, the devastating power harnessed in the vine would terminate her life in a heartbeat. To put it simply, Zhaoye's body was so feeble that fusing the vine of the Dongshu gourd into her would very likely result in her death, let alone manipulating the vine to form an intricate meridian network in her body. All of a sudden, a certain thought surfaced in Zhang Xian's mind, and he froze on the spot. Wait a moment. Is the meridian network of a human necessarily the most ideal layout? All of the 9,000 or so books that Yang Shi had gathered were all built upon the fundamental layout of the human meridian network, and that made the reconstruction phase exceptionally complex and dangerous. But was the meridian network of a human necessarily the best way to go about doing it? That was not necessarily the case. He knew of many formidable battle and cultivation techniques that had exceptionally awkward Jinqi pathways, making them difficult to execute and master. So could there be a more efficient meridian network than that of the humans? If there really existed one, that would significantly increase the chances of success of the meridian reconstruction process, and it would be highly beneficial for Zhao Ye's cultivation in the future. With such a thought in mind, Zhang Xian decided to get right to it. He raised his head to look at Yang Shi and asked, "Junior, do you have books on meridian networks? It doesn't necessarily have to be about humans. Those of Saint Beasts will work as well." Meridian networks? I do have quite a few books regarding that with me. I studied that back then as well, so I have books on humans, Saint Beasts, and even otherworldly demons. Yang Shi was not too sure why Zhang Xian was asking about that, but he still flicked his wrist and took out all of the books that he possessed regarding meridian networks. Just like how the otherworldly demons were researching master teachers were researching otherworldly demons. Only through understanding how the otherworldly demons drove their jinqi would the master teachers be able to better deduce the might of their cultivation techniques and devise feasible battle plans to better deal with them. You have my gratitude. Those books were bound to be incredibly valuable, but Yang Shi had still shown them to him, without any reservation. Zhang Xian nodded in gratitude before sweeping his gaze across them. Very soon, a brand new meridian network book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. It was vastly different from that of a human meridian network. Humans had 8 mystic meridians, but the meridian network reflected in the compiled book only consisted of core meridians leading to the 4 limbs. The previous unnecessary complexity in the network had vanished without a trace. There are the least flaws in this meridian network, so it's bound to be much stronger than that of a human. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. Through the Library of Heaven's Path, it was apparent that the human meridian network was riddled with flaws, making it highly inconvenient for one to cultivate. On the other hand, the newly compiled meridian network was simple but nearly flawless. It consisted only of the portions that were absolutely required, removing all of the extraneous complexity in the network. With fewer miscellaneous and secondary meridians, it would be much easier to cultivate, and the chances of one sustaining internal injuries would also be significantly lowered. Zhang Xian examined the new meridian network several times to ensure that it was feasible on a human body, before heaving a huge sigh of relief. He turned to the young lady before him and said, "I'll help you reconstruct your meridians right now. No matter how much pain you are in, you must grit your teeth and endure it. Otherwise, if any mishap happens, not even the deities will be able to save you." "Teacher, rest assured," Zhao Ye nodded resolutely. After seeing everything that her teacher had done for her, how could she chicken out right now and disappoint him? She had already gone through death once, so no matter how much pain she would be in later, she was determined to grit her teeth and get through it. "I have reconstructed meridians before, so I can help you." Seeing that Zhang Xian was going to make a move right after reading the books for a moment, Yang Shi hurriedly offered his help out of worry. "There's no need for that. I'm intending to use a different method, so I'm afraid that you won't be of much help." Zhang Xian shook his head. The new meridian network was different from that of an ordinary human. As talented as Yang Shi was, there was still a high chance that the other party would make a mistake given that it would be his first time coming into contact with something like this. On the other hand, the reconstruction of meridians was a delicate process that allowed for no mistakes at all. Zhang Xian could not afford to take the risk. A new method? Yang Shi's face twitched in shock. It could not be that his senior had already devised something new after barely researching the topic for a moment, could it? As expected of a celestial master teacher, his talent was truly something that could not be measured using common sense. "I'm starting now." Zhang Xian instructed Zhao Ye to sit cross-legged on the floor before flicking his wrist. Hula! The vine of the Dongshu gourd materialized in his hand. He swiftly infused his jinqi into it, and under the rapid inflow of his energy, the massive vine swiftly contracted. In less than 10 minutes, it was already roughly as thin as a strand of thread. Cold sweat dripped down Zhang Xian's forehead. It was fortunate that he had the ability to eliminate the spirit within the vine, and his Heaven's Path jinqi was also a powerful suppressant against it. Otherwise, it would have taken much more effort for him to tame it. Go! Zhang Xian flicked his finger, and the vine slipped into Zhaoya's body through her glabella and slowly unfolded itself within her body. As soon as the narrow vine entered her body, a burst of cold sweat swiftly broke out throughout the young lady's body, as a pained frown appeared on her face. The areas where her meridians used to be had already closed up, so the vine had to pave out new pathways within her body slowly, which was almost equivalent to drilling multiple holes within her body simultaneously. The pain that she would have to suffer as a result of that was imaginable. Reconstructing meridians is a very delicate process. You mustn't go too fast, and you mustn't stop halfway, Yang Shi advised. Zhang Xian nodded in response. Even if Yang Shi had not said it, he knew as much as well. In order to reduce the strain on Zhaoya's body, he would have to make sure to progress bit by bit, or else she would first collapse under the massive stress piled on her body before the reconstruction process could be completed. At the same time, the meridian reconstruction process could not be halted halfway through. Otherwise, the reversal of Jinqi would cause all of the meridians that had just barely formed to shatter once more. She might be able to survive the impact the first time around, but given the feeble state that she was in, if it happened again, not even the Heaven's Path Jinqi would be able to save her. However, that would not be a problem at all. He had plenty of time on his hands, so all he had to do was take his time. Jai. As the vine gradually paved its way throughout Zhaoya's body, her disposition was also undergoing a transformative change. It had grown even more refined and transcendental, as if an ethereal fairy. What an extraordinary meridian reconstruction technique! Zhang Xian had seen the meridian reconstruction technique that Yang Shi had devised as well, and while both would place the patient in great pain, Yang Shi's meridian reconstruction technique was inferior in the sense that the patient would have to rest for quite some time before they would finally regain their strength. On the other hand, this meridian reconstruction technique was actually able to induce a transformative change in the patient's disposition, even during the reconstruction process. With this, it was clear which meridian reconstruction technique was more advanced. However, the rate at which the meridians are being reconstructed is rather slow. It seems like it'll take roughly a day or so, Zhang Xian remarked. That's really a little too slow. Ever since he started cultivating, there had rarely been times where he would require more than 2 hours for his cultivation. Yet, the reconstruction of meridians actually took up an entire day. This left him feeling deeply helpless. But no matter what, Zhaoya was his direct disciple. No matter how long it would take, he would still have to advance slowly, so as to ensure her safety. Slow! Hearing Zhang Xian's muttering, Yang Shi's eyebrows twitched wildly. Back then, just to repair a single meridian, I spent 3 whole years. On the other hand, you are using only a single day to reconstruct an entire meridian network, and yet you are calling this slow? It seemed like his senior was really unaware of the difficulty in meridian reconstruction. Even with his strength, it had taken him 3 years to mend a single meridian, and yet, his senior was actually unsatisfied with taking up a single day. 3 years. Zhang Xian was rendered speechless. If he had to take 3 years just to mend a single meridian, he would have immediately chosen against it. He would simply have found some other way to restore Zhaoya's strength. Soon half a day ticked by, with his mind working under high intensity to ensure the highest possible level of precision in the reconstruction process. It did not take long for exhaustion to set in on Zhang Xian. Fortunately, Zhaoya was making great progress. As more and more of her meridians were healed up, her aura was gradually growing stronger and stronger. At the same time, her disposition and appearance were undergoing a massive change as well. If she was just a bud that had yet to fully blossom in the past, at that moment, her petals were starting to open into a full blossom. Noting the changes with his student, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. It seems like her pure-in body will be fully awakened once her meridians recover. He had been feeling a little distressed as to how he could awaken her unique constitution after reconstructing her veins. But from the looks of it, that was not a problem that he had to worry about anymore. Just by using the vine of the Dongshu gourd as her meridians, seemed to be sufficient to further awaken her purine body. Even if her purine body was not fully awakened by the end of the reconstruction process, it would not be too far from that anymore. With this step forward, she would no longer need to resort to harvesting yang energy from men in order to fully awaken her purine body. Truly incredible. Looking at what was happening from behind, Yang Shi's eyes lit up in agitation. With his eye of discernment, it went without saying that he could tell that the meridian reconstruction technique that Zhang Xian was using was far more than advanced than his. Even when seeing it with his own eyes, there were still many aspects of it that he could not completely comprehend. He had to ponder deeply over them and browse through several materials before he could make sense of them. For someone who had barely learned about meridian reconstruction, to be able to come up with something as ingenious as this. All of a sudden, Yang Shi was drawn out of his thoughts and whipped out a jade token, lowering his gaze to browse through its content. A deep frown slowly etched its way onto his forehead. What's wrong? Noticing the change in Yang Shi's expression, Zhang Xian shot a glance in his direction, while continuing with the reconstruction process. As long as he did not abruptly halt the meridian reconstruction process, he could still afford to look around him and speak, without bringing any adverse effects to Zhaoya. Senior, it's about your butler. Yang Shi replied with a troubled look on his face. My butler? Are you referring to Sun Chang? What happened to him? Zhang Xian frowned. As he had been in too much of a hurry to leave the Sanctum of Sages then, he did not have time to liaise with Sun Chang. However, as long as the latter did not leave the Sanctum of Sages, he should still be rather safe. Yang Shi hesitated for a moment before revealing what was written on the jade token. While I was making my way over to you, I instructed someone to take him over to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. It seemed like Zhang Shi and the other elders of the Sanctum of Sages bore him ill will, so I didn't think that it would be safe leaving him there. However, I just received a message saying that he got too depressed after learning the truth, resulting in him making a mistake in his cultivation. At the moment, he's already on the verge of death. That's impossible. Zhang Xian's eyes narrowed menacingly. The cultivation technique that he practices originates from me, and not to mention, he has always been an indolent individual. How could there be any problem in his cultivation? Sun Chang's cultivation had originated from him. Even if it had not reached the tier of Heaven's Path, it was far superior to the other cultivation techniques on the Master Teacher continent, possessing very few flaws. As long as he cultivated it properly, it was impossible for his cultivation to go berserk. How could anything happen just because he was upset? My guess is that someone is trying to uncover the secrets of your cultivation technique from your butler, so they intentionally gave him incorrect guidance to test some things out, thus resulting in an error in his cultivation. Yang Shi explained with a reddened face. He was well aware of the nature of the group in the Master Teacher Pavilion. He did not think that those people were doing this out of malice. Rather, they were probably just curious about his cultivation technique. After all, it was unthinkable for a butler of completely ordinary aptitude to advance through the cultivation ranks so quickly. It was no wonder they would be curious about his cultivation technique. Furthermore, Sun Chang had already been in a mentally distraught state before due to the revelation. It would be no wonder he would be swayed so easily by the master teachers at the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. That being said, despite the condition that Sun Chang was in, it was still unlikely that his life would be in any danger. While he was a prisoner, the master teachers in the headquarters were at least principled enough not to take a person's life lightly. Of course, it still would not do to leave Sun Chang just like that. That should be the case. Hearing Yang Shi's analysis, Zhang Xian nodded. His first instinct was to rush over to save Sun Chang, but he had his hands full with Zhaoya at the moment. Thus, he could only suppress his urge, turn to Yang Shi, and request. Junior, you are also aware that I have my hands full and can't leave this area yet. Thus, I'll have to ask you to help me rescue Sun Chang and bring him over to me. He has followed me since our time in the Tianxian Kingdom, and I cannot stand seeing any harm come to him. As long as Yang Shi stood up for him, with his influence and prestige, The other master teachers would not dare do anything to Sun Chang. That's simple. Since I was the one who got your butler into the headquarters, you can count on me to ensure his safety. Yang Shi nodded. However, you are currently in the midst of a meridian reconstruction process, and you can't afford to be interrupted by anyone at this point in time. If something happens while I am away, meridian reconstruction was an extremely delicate process, so Zhang Xian could not afford to be interrupted during this period of time. He did not dare imagine what would happen if he left right then, and some mishap occurred as a result of that. It's fine. I'm still rather confident in my ability to disguise myself. Just help me give a heads up to the guild leader of the Blacksmith Guild, and I believe that no one will dare cause any trouble here. So there shouldn't be any trouble on my side. On the other hand, Sun Chang's matter cannot be delayed, Zhang Xian said. While there was a master-teacher pavilion in the Empire Alliance, given his disguising ability, it would be nigh impossible for them to find him. Besides, as long as Yang Shi issued a command to the guild leader of the Blacksmith Guild as a 9-star blacksmith, the guild leader should be able to keep any uninvited guests away from him. After all, not even the master-teacher pavilion would dare barge into the Blacksmith Guild carelessly. Furthermore, he would be done with reconstructing Zhao Ye's meridians in another 4 hours or so, and they would be able to leave right after. Surely, nothing bad would happen within that short period of time. Yang Shi pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. All right then. I'll help you seal this area first. I'll be using the teleportation formation from the Glacier Plain Court, so I should be able to return very soon. The matter with Sun Chang was indeed more urgent. With a flick of his hand, he sealed the area completely before swiftly heading in the direction of the Glacier Plain Court. A short moment after Yang Shi left the Blacksmith Guild, he suddenly widened his eyes as a thought surfaced in his mind. How could I have forgotten about the matter concerning Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng? Sword Saint Meng had always thought of his senior as her son, and that was also one of the matters that Yang Shi had sought to verify. However, the revelation that the other party was a celestial master teacher had left him deeply shocked, and following that, he had been too deeply immersed in the ingenuity behind the other party's meridian reconstruction technique. As a result, that matter had completely slipped his mind. If it had been anyone else, given his eye of discernment, he would have been able to tell with a single look. However, his senior's soul depth was far higher than his, and he also had the ability to morph his physical body freely. It was difficult for him to discern his senior's original appearance, let alone determine the origin of his birth. Yang Shi shook his head as he continued heading forward. Forget it. Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng should be in the Glacier Plain Court at the moment. I'll just have to discreetly inform them of the matter and have them head over to take a look. Considering their blood ties, it should be easier for them to recognize him. While he did know quite a few things surrounding the young prodigy, it would still be best to have his own parents verify his identity. Since that was the case, he would just leave this matter to them. They were not very far away anyhow. Shortly after Yang Shi left, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. To be honest, it had been quite stressful for him to be standing before the man whom he had impersonated for so long. It was fortunate that the other party bore no malice toward him, and was deferential to his identity as the celestial master teacher. Otherwise, this matter might not have been able to be resolved so peacefully. Seeing that his surroundings were finally quiet, Zhang Xian exhaled deeply as a gleam surfaced in his eyes. All right, I should get to the real deal now. The new meridian network that he was going to reconstruct within Zhaoyu was simply too shocking, so he did not dare showcase it before Yang Shi. On top of that, he was not too sure how it would turn out. As such, he had only focused on building up the foundations and reconstructing the parts that still bore some resemblance to that of the human meridian network, avoiding the portions where the meridian network had changed as far as he could. But now that Yang Shi had finally left, there was no need for him to hold back. Zhaoya, from this point onward, I'll be paving open new meridians in areas where you didn't have meridians before, so the pain that you will be placed in will be 10 times more excruciating than before. You must hold on and maintain your consciousness, no matter what happens, understood? Knowing that the process would be unbearable for Xiaoya, Zhang Xian warned her grimly to allow her to prepare herself mentally for what was to come. The new meridian network would differ greatly from the 8 mystic meridians that was within a human's body, so there was no choice but for him to forcefully forge a way forward through unpaved terrain. The pain resulting from that would be as good as having a weapon stabbed into one's body and twisted around. And the worst part was that the weapon would be inching forward bit by bit. This was a pain that even the toughest of cultivators would find hard to endure. However, this was a necessary process in order to reconstruct her meridians. And even with his Heaven's Path Jinqi, there was not much that he could do to alleviate her pain. He could only pray that she would be able to grit her teeth and persevere to the end. Teacher, I understand. Rest assured I'll surely pull through, Xiaoya replied resolutely. As the vine slowly unfolded throughout her body, she could feel the changes in her body, and the hope for recovery was beginning to blossom in her. Not only so, she could sense that as long as she could pull through this ordeal, she would be able to push for a breakthrough directly. With her newfound power, she might just be able to help her teacher out of the current quandary that he was in. Thus, no matter what, she had to hold on. It was not just for her but for her teacher as well. Good. Hearing the resolve in Xiaoya's voice, Zhang Xian was reassured. He hesitated for a brief moment before flicking his fingers forward. Tzizi. Numerous surges of Jinqi swiftly shot forth in the form of thin threads, and they wrapped themselves around Xiaoya as if creating a cocoon. They served to protect the vital acupoints and organs within Xiaoya's body. After that was done, he continued pushing the thin vine forward, hastening its speed as it paved its way through Xiaoya's body. The new meridian network compiled through the Library of Heaven's Path was pretty much flawless, but ultimately, he still had not tested it. Thus, he had no way of knowing what would happen to Xiaoya's body as a result of the new meridian network. As such, he had taken every protective measure possible just to be safe. By using his Jinqi to seal Xiaoya's vital acupoints and organs, the moment that something went wrong, he could use his Jinqi to ward off any damage and heal her vitals at the same time, thus opening up the possibility for an emergency rescue. Otherwise, if he made a move only after something had happened, it would already be too late. Ho. As the vine began making its way toward the unpaved regions, Zhang Xian heightened his attention to keep a closer eye on things. Teacher, the young lady moaned. Her body was shivering intensely from the excruciating pain drilling through her body. It was at a scale far beyond what she had felt before. Even death had not left her as frightened as this. If not for her sheer willpower pushing her on, she might have already fainted. Grit your teeth and hold on. The meridians here will be useful for your future cultivation. Zhang Xian bellowed. I will hold on. Xiaoya nodded feebly. Good. Hearing that Xiaoya could still respond to him, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief as he continued driving the vine forward. Hung long. As the vine finally pushed through a bottleneck, the aura emanating from Xiaoya's body suddenly warped into a foreign form. It was tinged with sharpness and ferocity, reminiscent to the aura of a gladiator charging toward his enemy. This aura pierced right into Zhang Xian's soul, shaking him at his core. This is the aura of an otherworldly demon? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes in shock. This aura was simply too familiar to him. It was something that only otherworldly demons should possess. He could emulate it using his Heaven's Path Jinqi, but even his emulation was not able to reach this level of purity. It was as if Xiaoya had suddenly turned into an otherworldly demon emperor, possessing a bloodline that was even stronger than vicious. Could it be because of the involvement of the otherworldly demon's meridian network in the compiled meridian network? Zhang Xian's face turned livid. The new meridian network that he was paving for Xiaoya was compiled out of the books that detailed not only human meridian networks, but those of saint beasts and otherworldly demons too. The area that the vine was paving open did not exist in the human meridian network, but it was present in the otherworldly demon meridian network. Zhang Xian thought that a similarity in meridian network should not mean anything at all, but contrary to his expectations, it actually caused the warping of her aura. Xiaoya, how are you feeling right now? Zhang Xian asked nervously. I am fine. Zhao Ya's voice was very soft and strained. It seemed like she had to exert all of her strength in order to squeeze out those 3 words from her mouth. Hearing that Zhao Ya was fine, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he swiftly analyzed the situation before him. Otherworldly demons do possess vastly different meridian networks compared to that of humans. Could the reason behind the difference in the level of existence between humans and the otherworldly demonic tribe be due to the difference in their meridian network? Otherworldly demons possess strength equivalent to transcendent mortals at birth, and their lifespan was far longer than any human. As long as they were not killed due to some external event, they could easily live for tens of thousands of years. This was something that even ancient sage human cultivators were unable to achieve. Just from that in itself, it could be seen that otherworldly demons were beings that were more biologically advanced than humans. Just by altering Zhao Ya's meridians to resemble those of an otherworldly demon, her aura swiftly changed from that of a docile human to that of a ferocious otherworldly demon. Was that not evidence that it was the difference in meridian networks that resulted in the difference in the level of existence of the 2 races? If that was the case, were humans able to accept the meridian network of the otherworldly demons? If it was possible for the meridians of a human cultivator to be reconstructed in likeness of the otherworldly demons, and the method to do so was propagated throughout the modern teacher continent, would the human race not grow far stronger and live far longer? As this thought surfaced in Zhang Xian's mind, he quickly established a mental connection with Vicious in the Book of Heaven's Path, and soon, he received his answer. Master, there's indeed a fundamental difference between the meridian networks of humans and otherworldly demons. However, I fear that there won't be too many of the vine you have in the world. Furthermore, you are probably the only person in the world who is able to save a cultivator whose meridians have collapsed properly. Even that young sure fellow from before wouldn't be able to pull something like that off. Zhang Xian shook his head and sighed. I guess you're right. Indeed, he only had this single vine from the Dongshu gourd, and judging from what Yang Shi had said, it seemed like the vine in his possession was an anomaly as well. Furthermore, the only reason Zhao Yu was able to survive even after having all of her meridians shattered was due to Zhang Xian spending an entire day infusing his Heaven's Path Shenqi into every single part of her body. Without either of those 2, it would be impossible to replicate this miracle. Besides the utter collapse of meridians and the excruciating and lengthy reconstruction process. Honestly, this was not something that a normal cultivator could endure. It seems like it will be impossible to spread this procedure throughout the master-teacher continent. Zhang Xian shook his head in pity. If humans could possess as much potential and as long a lifespan as the otherworldly demonic tribe, Kong Shi's goal of a strong mankind could very well be achieved. Even if the master-teacher pavilion ceased to exist, mankind would still wield the power to protect itself. However, it was a pity that the vision would never come to be. Furthermore, it was still too early to tell whether the new meridian network would truly be beneficial or not. If Zhao Yu became as brutal and callous as the otherworldly demons as a result of the altered meridian network, then the creation of the new meridian network might not necessarily be a blessing for mankind. Until the results were conclusive, it was best to just wait and see. Continue. Despite the risks of the new meridian network, Zhang Xian knew that it was already too late to back out. Thus, he continued driving the vine to pave a way forward in Zhao Ya's body, and slowly, the aura of the otherworldly demonic tribe that the latter emanated grew stronger and stronger. All of a sudden, a loud bellow echoed throughout the entire hall, causing even the roof to shudder. Zhang Xian, come out and accept your death. Sila. Following which, the seal placed over the hall was torn apart by a powerful force. What? Zhang Xian raised his head, only to see the first elders of the Zhang clan and the Glacier Plain court, Zhang Wuheng and Yu Ruoxin, floating in the air, gazing down on him coldly. Without a doubt, the attack that had destroyed the seal had been executed them. The seal that Yang Shi had left behind would have had no trouble withstanding the attack of St. Nine Dan cultivators. But under the devastating force of two top-notch experts, who had already surpassed St. Nine Dan, there was no way it could possibly stand a chance. You sure know how to disguise yourself well. If not for your otherworldly demon aura leaking out, even I would have had trouble trying to recognize you. Zhang Wuheng sneered coldly as he glared fixedly at the young man within the hall, seemingly fearing that the latter would disappear from his sight if he averted his gaze for a moment. Zhang Xian, what else do you have to say for yourself? As he spoke, a powerful aura burst forth from him, crushing the hall beneath so heavily that it almost seemed as if the ground would be reduced to dust. Standing right in its face, Zhang Xian felt his body freezing in place. The surrounding air suddenly grew so heavy that it suffocated him. Despite having achieved a breakthrough to Saint 8 Dan Dimension Sundering Realm, he still was not close to being a match for the First Elder. The other party had definitely already reached the level of a great sage, or else he could not possibly have survived a cultivation ordeal that had already surpassed the scale of a macrocosm ascendancy ordeal. Seeing the confident looks on the faces above, he knew that the other party had seen through his disguise too. Thus, he reverted to his original appearance and gazed upward. I have nothing to say for myself. However, I plead for you all to just give me 4 more hours. I have something important that I have to finish. Zhaoye was currently in a crucial phase in the reconstruction of her meridians. If he halted right now, even if she survived this ordeal, the wounds that she would sustain as a result would be irrecoverable. In any case, after her meridians were healed up, he would be able to slowly deal with the Zhang clan, Glacier Plain Court, and the Sanctum of Sages. 4 hours? To give you time to escape? Do you take us for fools? Dream on. Zhang Wuheng sneered coldly as he turned around and gestured grandly. The rest of you can appear now. If you harbored any doubts toward my previous report, I believe that this should be more than enough to prove the authenticity of my words. The thing in front of him is emanating such concentrated killing intent. Even if it isn't an otherworldly demon, it's bound to be some kind of precious artifact of the otherworldly demonic tribe. Despite being a master teacher, he dares to collude with the otherworldly demonic tribe to conspire against mankind. Surely, I need not say more about the implications of his actions, right? Voila! Right after those words were spoken, multiple bursts of wind echoed in the surroundings as 15 master teachers flew over from all around. Each of them emanated a powerful aura that paled nowhere in comparison to that of Yu Ruoxin or Zhang Wuheng. As their auras weighed down on the entire blacksmith guild, it created a sensation that felt as if the world was collapsing on one. They are all 9-star master teachers? Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes in horror. Each of these master teachers had a 9-star emblem pinned on their chests, just like Elder Chu. In fact, even without their emblems, their esteemed standing was apparent just from their strength that they commanded. For 15 9-star master teachers to appear in a single area simultaneously, just to apprehend him, they sure held him in high regard. While he had caused quite the uproar in the Zhang clan and the Glacier Plain Court, considering how Zhang Wuheng and Yu Ruoxin were already around, it would be an impressive lineup with just another 1 or 2 9-star master teachers with them. Yet for 15 to appear along with them, when did 9-star master teachers become so cheap and commonplace? It could not be that the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters had actually dispatched all of its experts to deal with him. Could it? Are you Zhang Xian? In his moment of shock, a voice suddenly sounded from above. It was from an elder in the sky, who was gazing down on him, with a look of incomprehension and lamentation. Deputy Pavilion Master Ren Qingyuan. After hearing the reports from the 3 powers, Ren Qingyuan had thought that the fellow who had been causing trouble all around would be some kind of formidable figure. As such, he was a little bewildered to see that the person in question was just a 20-year-old young man with a perfectly ordinary appearance. His cultivation was only at Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage, and honestly, there did not seem to be anything particularly outstanding about him. If one really had to point out something that was extraordinary about him, it would be how calm he was able to remain despite standing in the face of all of them. In terms of mental resilience, he could already surpass some of the 9-star master teachers. I am indeed Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian replied with a nod. I have looked through your records. You have successfully crashed 2 pavilions and conquered the Tower of Master Teachers as well. You have shown outstanding talent in many of your supporting occupations. And you also managed to foil the ploy of the otherworldly demonic tribe's Qingtian lineage. There is no denying that you have made outstanding contributions to mankind. However, as a master teacher, virtue should always come first. You wreaked havoc in the Zhang clan, Sanctum of Sages, and the Glacier Plain Court. And that is more than enough to strike off any contribution that you have made. Why are destroying your own future? Ren Qingyuan said. A person as talented as the young man before him was bound to achieve great things in the future. But why did he have to ruin everything for himself? Before Zhang Xian could speak, Zhang Wuheng interjected with a cold sneer. Pavilion Master Ren, why are you wasting your breath on him? You aren't intending to cover up for him, just because he's a master teacher, are you? Cover up? First Elder, I have to ask you to watch your tongue, be it master teachers or ordinary cultivators. As long as he has sinned, he would be punished. All are equal before the law. Ren Qingyuan said. Humph, that would be for the best. Zhang Xian has wreaked havoc in the Zhang clan, destroying countless buildings and injuring many of our elders. The sins that he has committed are more than enough to put him to death many times over. Since Pavilion Master Ren has agreed that he should be punished, I won't stand on ceremony. Men, seal the area. Make sure that he can't get away. Zhang Wuheng waved his hand grandly. Voila! Another 8 more men dressed in robes imprinted with the Zhang clan insignia rose into the air. They were experts from the Zhang clan, and their cultivation had all reached Saint Nine Dan. With their combined strength, they swiftly sealed the surrounding space firmly, rendering even teleportation formations unusable within this space. He destroyed our Sanctum of Sages and showed blatant disrespect to me and my elders. The Sanctum of Sages will not turn a blind eye to this matter either. Someone bellowed from the distance. So. Deputy Sanctum Head Zhan Shi of the Sanctum of Sages swiftly flitted over with more than a dozen experts from the Sanctum of Sages, following behind him. They took their stance above the Blacksmith Guild, as well as they gazed down at Zhang Xian with menacing eyes. Despite being a student of the Sanctum of Sages, he had willfully destroyed the Sanctum Head Hall and its surrounding buildings. Not only so, he had even openly defied and injured Zhan Shi and the others. This had gone far beyond what they could tolerate. Zhang Xian, it's one thing for you to destroy our Glacier Plain Court, but how dare you kidnap our young court chief as well? There's no way we are going to forgive you for this. Yu Ruoxin also stepped forward as an imposing aura burst forth from her. That fellow had acted as Yang Xian and sneaked their young court chief away, destroying countless buildings of the Glacier Plain Court in the midst of doing so. If not out of deference for Pavilion Master Ren, she would have dashed right forward to tear that fellow into pieces. Paying no heed to Zhang Wuheng and Zhan Shi, Zhang Xian turned his gaze toward Yu Ruoxin and scoffed. Kidnapped your young court chief? Are you really saying that I have kidnapped Zhaoya? To think that the Glacier Plain Court would have a habit of spinning lies to your convenience. He was willing to admit that the fault was with him for what happened at the Zhang clan and the Sanctum of Sages, but for the Glacier Plain Court to claim that he had kidnapped Zhaoya, that was truly ridiculous. If not for them resorting to depraved means in order to awaken their purine body, cornering Zhaoya to the point where she had to turn to him for help, those subsequent events would not have happened. If they looked back to the root of the matter, the primary culprit was the Glacier Plain Court. Yet, they actually twisted the story to suit their purpose, claiming that he had kidnapped Zhaoya instead. Preposterous. To allow the other powers to spout such blatant lies. Had the Master-Teacher Pavilion really turned so lax? Or perhaps, just like what Yang Shi had said, the truth mattered not to them, as long as they could achieve their personal motives. At this point, Zhang Xian raised his head to look at the 9-star Master-Teachers above him with wintry eyes. What irony! I thought that the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters would be able to remain a neutral and impartial party on the Master-Teacher continent, But right now, it appears to me that it has already chosen to align itself with the Glacier Plain Court and become its spokesperson. Just how much lower can the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters fall? Audacious. Upon hearing those words, the 9-star master teachers in the sky immediately bellowed furiously. The Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters was the top power on the Master Teacher continent, and it had always been known as the embodiment of impartiality and justice. Yet, the young man spoke as if they were acting in collusion with the Glacier Plain Court. In an instant, all of the 9-star master teachers flew into rage. You said that I'm audacious? So be it. You are already determined to pin all of those crimes on me anyway. So what difference would one more make? Zhang Xian shook his head as he spoke with a voice filled with desolation. It was no wonder Yang Shi was so disappointed in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters and refused to return there. Their actions were truly hard to accept. It should not have been too difficult for the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters to find out that Zhao Yu was actually his direct disciple, and that should cast some doubts on the Glacier Plain Court's claims that he had kidnapped Zhao Yu. Yet, without bothering to clarify the matter, they had simply chosen to go along with the Glacier Plain Court, simply for their own convenience. This was truly an embarrassment to all master teachers. Since you know your guilt, you should just surrender straight. Yu Ruoxin harumphed coldly. Where is our young court chief? Where have you hidden her? Your young court chief is in here. Zhang Xian harumphed as he gestured to the cocoon in front of him. What did you say? Yu Ruoxin's heart skipped a beat. The cocoon made of Jinqi threads did have the shape of a human, but from the killing intent emanating from within, it was apparent that an otherworldly demon lay within. Yet the other party had actually said that their young court chief was inside. Could it be that the other party had used some secret art to turn their young court chief into an otherworldly demon? But was there really such a technique in the world? Was one's race not decided at birth? Don't listen to his nonsense. He's just stalling for time, waiting for an opportune moment to escape. Let's just attack him all at once and apprehend him first. We can slowly interrogate him once we've sealed his cultivation. Zhang Wuheng bellowed loudly. Indeed, we should apprehend him first before deciding on anything else. That fellow has simply too many tricks up his sleeves. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that he'll try to pull something. Elder Chu yelled in consent amid the crowd. While the young man's prowess was nothing much to fear, he had powerful tamed beasts and possessed the ability to manipulate the lightning tribulation. After all that they had been through, they knew better than to underestimate the young man. If the young man brought out some unbelievable trump card and successfully escaped right before their eyes, the lot of them would really become the laughing stock of the entire continent. After saying those words, Elder Chu turned around and clasped his fist. Pavilion Master Ren, just seal his cultivation, Don't go too heavy on him. Ren Qingyuan gave his word of approval, since the master-teacher pavilion had already gone to the extent of issuing an arrest warrant. Naturally, they could not just this matter go without doing anything. As for interrogation and the like, that could come after they grasped control of the situation. Yes, voila. Elder Chu turned to Zhang Wuheng and said, First Elder, you have heard it. Make your move. All right. A cold smile crept onto Zhang Wuheng's face as he waved his hand grandly. Hula. The 8 experts of the Zhang clan immediately encircled Zhang Xian. They gathered their strength together in order to form an energy barrier around the young man, slowly tightening it as they walked closer and closer to him. Knowing that the meridian reconstruction process would be forcefully halted if he was captured by them, Zhang Xian's face turned livid. He flicked his wrist and released the Inferno Qilin as he bellowed. Inferno Qilin, stop them! He was bound to the spot at the moment, so he could only rely on his tamed beast. It was fortunate that he had used medicinal herbs and his Heaven's Pathshenchi to heal the Inferno Qilin's injuries over the past 2 days. Otherwise, he would have been completely helpless at this moment. Hong Long. As soon as the Inferno Qilin appeared, it let loose a resounding roar before swiping its claw ferociously at the surroundings. Sila. Perhaps it was because it had seen through the flaws of their collaboration, or maybe its might was simply that great. But the Inferno Qilin successfully tore apart the energy barrier created by the 8 Zhang clan experts instantaneously, forcefully pushing them back. While they were all at St. Nine Dan, the Inferno Qilin still wielded an advantage due to its superior strength and physique. With its strength, unless the opponent was a great sage, ordinary St. Nine Dan cultivators would not stand a chance against it at all. You ungrateful scoundrel! The Zhang clan fed you for 3 years, yet you chose to conspire with others to deal with us. You are courting death. Knowing that Zhang Xian would bring out the Inferno Qilin to protect him, the first elder took a step forward and thrust his palm forward. Hula! He tossed an artifact reminiscent of a fishnet outward, and it swiftly grew larger and larger in midair. Roar! Upon seeing the fishnet, a hint of fear surfaced in the eyes of the Inferno Qilin. It immediately retreated, attempting to flee. However, the artifact in the air seemed to have sealed space in a manner such that no matter how the Inferno Qilin tried to retreat, it was still unable to escape from the fishnet. To think that the first elder would actually bring the dragon snare along with him. Pinnacle artifact, that's right? The artifact that our clan had used to capture the Inferno Qilin. There's no way the Inferno Qilin will be able to get away no matter how powerful it is. Upon seeing the fishnet-like object falling toward the Inferno Qilin, the experts of the Zhang clan heaved a sigh of relief. The dragon snare was an artifact that could even trap saint beasts that possessed the dragon bloodline. While the Inferno Qilin was powerful, its strength was still lacking in comparison to beasts that possessed the dragon bloodline. Voila! While the crowd was still discussing the matter, the dragon snare fell right on the Inferno Qilin, trapping it in place. The latter struggled desperately in the hope of fleeing, but it was unable to free itself from the dragon snare. Come over. Zhang Wuheng waved his hand, and the dragon snare began contracting in size as it flew over to his palm. On the other hand, the Inferno Qilin appeared to have been sealed in another parallel dimension. It roared in fury, but there was nothing that it could do at all. Not expecting Zhang Wuheng to have such a powerful artifact in his possession, Zhang Xian narrowed his eyes. With his current strength, without making use of the power from lightning tribulations, he was completely helpless against experts of Zhang Wuheng's caliber. Now that his greatest trump card has been nullified, there's no need to fear him anymore. Continue, Zhang Wuheng commanded as he threw the trapped Inferno Qilin into his folded space. Hula! The 8 experts swiftly got to their positions and gathered their strength together to form an energy barrier around Zhang Xian once more, limiting his area of movement. Surrender right now, and you can be spared from some pain. One of the experts of the Zhang clan sneered coldly as he thrust his finger toward Zhang Xian's glabella. In face of that attack, Zhang Xian's body stiffened. If he was struck by that finger strike, his cultivation would swiftly dissipate, rendering him completely helpless. At the same time, the meridian reconstruction process would be interrupted as well. However, he was in no state to avoid the attack either. While he could still multitask to some extent, he could not afford to channel his energy elsewhere or even move away, or else it would disrupt the meridian reconstruction process. And that would likely result in adverse consequences for Xiaoya. From the looks of it, he had no choice but to release his clone and Vicious together to fend off those Zhang clan experts for the time being. It was a small matter for him to be apprehended, but if the meridian reconstruction process was disrupted, Xiaoya could very well lose her life. That was not an outcome that he could accept. However, releasing Vicious would really be the final straw. Once he brought it out in public, there would be no way that he could explain it to the Master-Teacher Pavilion without revealing his celestial Master-Teacher identity anymore. Also, he was a little apprehensive about bringing his clone out. After all, it was a god-tier artifact, and it could serve as a powerful trump card in times of emergency. Forget it, there's no choice anymore. At this point, there's no backing down anymore. Seeing that the finger strike of the Zhang clan expert was about to reach him, and that there was not any time to be wasted, Zhang Xian gritted his teeth and flicked his wrist, intending to let Vicious out. However, in this crucial moment, a voice rumbled furiously from afar. "Who dares touch my teacher?" Boom! The next moment, the energy barrier created by the 8 experts abruptly dissipated, following which, the Zhang clan expert that was making a move on Zhang Xian suddenly started convulsing, causing him to crash right into the ground. Blood spurted wildly from both his mouth and nose. What? The other Zhang clan experts also did not expect to meet with such a turn of events, and they hurriedly turned their heads over to see the culprit who had made a move on them. However, before they could see the other party's face, they suddenly started convulsing and plummeted to the ground as well. Poison Hall's Right Guardian Shinju, Toxic Hand Eminence He Guangyu, and Myriad Poison Eminence Lin Jianghai have come under orders to offer Zhang Shi our aid. We implore Zhang Shi to pardon us for arriving late. So. 3 silhouettes suddenly appeared right before Zhang Xian, and they swiftly kneeled down on a single knee. Why are the lot from the Poison Hall here? It's said that the new head of the Poison Hall is the reincarnation of their founder. As a possessor of the innate poison body, she possesses fearsome means. Just a while ago, the Master Teacher Pavilion dispatched a 9-star Master Teacher to scout out the Poison Hall, but he ended up being knocked out by poison instead. I don't understand. Why are they getting involved in this conflict as well? I have read Zhang Xian's records, and it seems like he once met the Poison Masters in a Poison Hall and integrated them into the ranks of the Combat Master Hall. Could they be repaying the debt from there? That's a rather low-tier Poison Hall over there. Surely it wouldn't warrant the Right Guardian and 2 of the 4 eminences personally heading over to protect him, right? Just a moment ago I heard someone shout, "Who dares touch my teacher?" Could it be that these Poison Masters are actually Zhang Xian's students? The abrupt turn of events caused a huge commotion amid the crowd. Everyone had thought that Zhang Xian was doomed, but who could have thought that 3 top brass from the Poison Hall would actually arrive at this moment to save him? These 3 men were figures who could cause the entire master-teacher continent to rattle with just a stomp of their feet. There was a famous quote in the master-teacher continent that if a 9-star poison master was locked in the same room as a 9-star master-teacher, the one who would walk out alive would likely be the 9-star poison master. And these 3 men happened to be the cream of the crop of 9-star poison masters. That should be more than enough to show how fearsome they were. The Poison Hall has always been a reclusive power, holding itself within the depths of a mountain range, and refusing to submit to the master-teacher pavilion's from their home base to wreak havoc there. They could very well make use of this opportunity to encircle and eliminate the master Ren Yuan. Ren Shi rested his thumb across his neck. The Poison Hall has always been an unstable factor over the last few years. Continent. Many things have happened to the Poison Hall to encircle and eliminate them. If they had continued holding up in their mountain valley, and the other 2 still have had problems dealing with them. However, since they have decided to run out in agreement, this is indeed an ideal opportunity to take them down once and for all. Cold glint in his eyes. These 3 can be considered as the strongest before waving his hand lightly aside from their hall master. 9-star master even if we make a move on them, swiftly understood we'll have to move very carefully and discreetly spread around the surroundings if we sustain heavy losses while apprehending them from the area. The Poison Hall's reputation had never been good to the movements of the master because they had chosen to hold themselves up in a mountain range that loomed just ahead of them, all kind of traps, and shrouded by a poisonous mist. And Guangyu raised their gazes to look at the young man ahead of them. Hadn't been able to launch a large-scale invasion just who the man worthy of being their hall master's teacher and winning her absolute loyalty was. To be honest, they were slightly disappointed by what they saw. The person standing before them was younger than they had expected, and while his cultivation was exceptional for his age, it came nowhere close to matching to their hall master. They did not think that the young man was worthy of having their hall master mobilize their entire Poison Hall just to save him. It was truly hard for them to understand why their hall master would think so highly of the young man before them. But despite the doubts in their hearts, they dared not allow it to show on their faces. That last, not expecting that Poison Hall to actually dispatch men to save him, Zhang Xian felt a little moved and helpless at the same time. The Poison Hall had always been on bad terms with the Master-Teacher Pavilion. He was indeed thankful for their timely arrival, but at the same time, this could also lead to unnecessary complications. While continuing to reconstruct Zhaoye's meridians, he gazed at the trio kneeling before him and asked, "Where is your hall master?" He was certain that he had heard Wei Ruyan's voice earlier, even though it had been quite some distance away. However, since she had come to save him, why did she disappear all of a sudden? Reporting to Zhang Shi, our hall master said that the Master-Teacher Pavilion's acts of encircling and assaulting you are deplorable and utterly shameless. She ordered us to rush over to protect you first, while she takes a trip to the Master-Teacher Pavilion in the vicinity to repay the favor to them. Lin Jianghai clasped his fist as he reported, "She is going around the Master-Teacher Pavilions in the vicinity to repay the favor?" Wei Ruyan had been in a sickly state from a very young age, living a life that could hardly be counted as a life, with little regard for rules and convention. If it was her, she really might go around poisoning master teachers, just to vent anger against the Master-Teacher Pavilion on his behalf. Hearing those words, the master teachers in the area nearly plummeted to the ground from a mixture of horror and rage. "You cowards!" This was especially so for Ren Qingyuan. He nearly exploded on the spot. Possessing the innate poison body, the head of the Poison Hall was as good as a walking calamity. Even 9-star master teachers would not be able to withstand the poison that she emanated, let alone ordinary master teachers. If she made a move personally, this would really end in a widespread massacre for all of the master teachers in the vicinity. Unable to hold back his rage anymore, Ren Qingyuan bellowed in fury, "Take down Zhang Xian and those 3 fellows right now." It was in consideration of his identity that he had been unwilling to have the master teachers make a move previously. After all, it would be dishonorable for 9-star master teachers like them to gang up on a junior. However, with the head of the Poison Hall on the loose, he could not care that much anymore. They had to quickly apprehend those four, so that they could devote their forces to dealing with the head of the poison hall. A second wasted could mean the deaths of 100 more master teachers. Aside from that, they would also be able to use those four as hostages in order to force the head of the poison hall to stop what she was doing and cure the master teachers that she had poisoned. Yes, upon hearing the orders, the master teachers immediately released furious roars and rushed forward. Elder Chu charged ahead of the group and kick-started the duel with a palm thrust toward Shenju. Sila. In an instant, the surrounding air suddenly grew incredibly viscous. An overwhelming might poured down like a raging waterfall, threatening to bore a hole into the ground. Elder Chu could not be considered too strong among the 9-star master teachers in the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, but he was still unmistakably a great sage expert. Powerful shockwaves rippled out from his furious palm thrust, and unable to take the impact, the blacksmith guild abruptly collapsed into rubble. Facing Elder Chu's devastating attack, Shenju's lips curled up. "Do you think that you alone will be enough to kill me? Think again." With a cold harumph, he retaliated with a palm strike of his own. As the right guardian of the poison hall, as well as an individual who had almost succeeded in becoming the hall master, Shenju's strength was definitely not one to be underestimated. The moment that the two palms collided with one another, Elder Chu felt the power that he commanded being swiftly corroded by some intangible force, to the point where he could almost feel a burning sensation on his skin. "It's lethal poison." Elder Chu narrowed his eyes in realization as he quickly flicked his free wrist and took out a jade bottle. Without any hesitation, he crushed the jade bottle into bits. Boom! A gush of water shot out from the bottle, and it swiftly dissipated Shenju's jinqi as soon as it came into contact with it. Tianyan Divine Water? The Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters sure is extravagant. Shenju sneered with an awful look on his face. The Tianyan Divine Water could be said to be the closest thing that the Physician Guild headquarters had created that could be termed as an all-cure panacea to poison. However, it was also incredibly difficult to concoct, making it a priceless treasure. However, Elder Chu did not hesitate to use a large quantity at once, and as a result of that, Shenju's poison art was severely weakened. Of course, it's important to be prepared before dealing with underhanded scoundrels like you. Seeing that the divine water had effectively neutralized Shenju's attack, Elder Chu bellowed loudly, "Comrades, hurry up and make a move as well. This is a good opportunity to rid the Master Teacher continent of the vermin known as the Poison Hall." Charge! The morale of the Master Teachers was raised tremendously, and they swiftly whipped out all kinds of treasures to enter the fray. Voila! In an instant, attacks from all directions rushed toward Zhangxian, forming a frightening storm. Facing the onslaught of the Master Teachers, Lin Jianghai's face turned livid as he furiously roared, "Protect Zhangshi at all costs." Very well. The other two swiftly moved their focus to defense, and they hurriedly drove their jinqi to form a protective barrier around them to ward off the attacks. Hung Long Long. As powerful as the three of them were, there was no way that they could stand a chance against 15 Master Teachers together with Zhang Wuheng, Yu Ruoxin, Zhan Shi, and the others simultaneously. In just 2 breaths, a crack had already appeared in their barrier, and the three of them spurted mouthfuls of blood simultaneously. The situation was truly disadvantageous for them. Seeing that the 3 poison masters were swiftly reaching their limits, Zhang Xian shook his head and said, "Abandon the energy barrier and heed my commands." The offensive prowess of the simultaneous assault from 15 9-star Master Teachers was simply too frightening. Putting aside the 3 poison masters, even if Yang Shi was around, he would also have succumbed swiftly. Heed your commands? Shinju and the others were surprised to hear such words from Zhang Xian. Even they were helpless against so many 9-star master teachers. So what could a mere Saint 8 Dan cultivator possibly do? That's right, Zhang Xian replied as he met the gazes of the 3 of them one by one. Seeing that the young man was not joking around, the 3 poison masters traded gazes as deep frowns appeared on their foreheads. The opponents that they were facing were 9-star master teachers. Every single one of them was unimaginably powerful. If they followed the young man's commands on this matter, they could very well be wiped out. Lin Jianghai sent a telepathic message to Shinju and He Guangyu. Guys, let's just listen to him. Our hall master instructed us to hold him in higher regard than her. Shinju and He Guangyu hesitated for a moment before nodding in agreement. From their interactions with the hall master, they also knew how highly the hall master viewed her teacher. If something happened to him today, she would surely have them killed in a moment of fury. The current situation was already bad enough as it was. Since they did not have any better ideas in mind, it could be worth gambling on the young man. He might just hold the key to leading them out of this crisis. Forcefully holding the barrier up to fend off the barrage of attacks, Lin Jianghai quickly asked Zhang Xian. Zhang Shi, what do you want us to do? Zhang Xian's voice echoed by the ears of the crowd. Dissipate the energy barrier. Shinju, drive your golden yang poison art. Take 20 steps forward and flick your left hand. I know that there's the venomous essence of dust-breaking twilight in your fingernails, so flick them out. Lin Jianghai, take 27 steps to your right and prepare to release your crimson consonants. There's no need to aim at any specific person. Just scatter it lightly into the surroundings, and you'll see its worth. He Guangyu, nicknamed the Thousand Hands Poison. I know that you bring a huge variety of lethal poison on you, or more specifically 54 poisons. Remain where you are and scatter 8 of them toward the sky that he had met after which shoot 17 of them right ahead of you. Then the dust-breaking twilight was a lethal poison that he had concocted. You can decide then whether it's worthwhile to continue following my orders or not. On a name for it on his way there. Know of my dust-breaking twilight. Not even the hall master would be aware of it. Body clearly stiffened. Yet the young man was able to name it and point out that it was hidden in his left fingernail. Shinju was not the only one who was shocked. With a look of disbelief on his face, He Guangyu exclaimed in shock. You know that I have 54 different poisons on me? As those poisons were his trump card. Not even the closest people to him knew the number of poisons that he carried with him. On top of that, he reserved 2 of them for only the direst of situations, vowing to keep them hidden unless the situation truly called for them. Despite that, the young man had still been able to accurately point out how many poisons he had with him. And that was not all. Each poison had an optimal way of planting them, depending on their properties and forms. There were exactly 8 poisons in his possession that were discreet enough to be scattered upward without anyone noticing. And similarly, there were exactly 17 of them that could be fired as swift projectiles, making them suited for direct offense. In other words, there was no doubt that the young man really knew what poisons he had in his possession. Was the young man actually a mind reader? Seeing that the 3 poison masters were still dawdling around after hearing his commands, Zhang Xian growled in displeasure. If you still treasure your lives, hurry up and get to it. Yes, knowing that this was not a good time to allow their thoughts to wander, the trio swiftly acted according to Zhang Xian's instructions. While they could not fathom what the purpose of making those moves was, the fact that the young man was completely aware of their trump cards was more than enough to say that he was not messing around and had a plan in mind. Shinju swiftly drove his golden yang poison art before he decisively abandoned the energy barrier and dashed forward. He took exactly 20 steps forward just as commanded. Selah. Barely after he stopped his footsteps, he felt a powerful force sweeping way. The attacks of 2 master teachers were already right before him. He flicked his left finger lightly and shot out the dust-breaking twilight venomous essence that he had hidden beneath his fingernail. Tizz. As soon as the venomous essence came into contact with the master teacher's attacks, their zhenqi immediately began corroding. This is bad. It's lethal poison. Narrowing their eyes in shock, the two master teachers immediately retreated in a fluster. At this moment, Lin Jianghai had already taken 27 steps right at the crimson consonants and scattered the crimson consonants powder began bubbling, and the two master teachers happened to step right into its area of scatter. The two master teachers immediately spurted blood out. In no state to attack anymore, they quickly retreated out of the area of battle and sat on the floor to suppress the poison running through their veins. The 15 master teachers were moving as a whole in a formation, so with the abrupt disappearance of two members, the formation swiftly collapsed. He Guangyu's lethal poison dispersed into the surroundings, forcing the master teachers to back off 100 meters away. It was almost as if a vacuum had been created in an instant. All of a sudden, the master teachers who had been ferociously attacking a moment ago dared not approach. Seeing how the crisis that they had been facing was resolved with just a few simple movements, the three poison masters traded incredulous glances with one another. They were confident of their strength, but the enemy had the Tianyan divine water to suppress them, which placed them in a highly disadvantageous position. If the fight had dragged on, it was only a matter of time before they sustained heavy injuries. However, by following Zhang Shi's commands, not only did they manage to avoid direct confrontation with the divine water, they also managed to incapacitate two master teachers and successfully drive back the others. This was a result that they could brag about for many years and pass down to their descendants. At the same time, it would also serve as a testimony of the might of the poison hall. Zhang Shi, unable to hold back their agitation, the three turned intrigued gazes to Zhang Xian. They had simply followed the young man's orders, but even at that moment, they were unable to comprehend how it had produced the effect that it did. Knowing that the three poison masters were curious about what had just happened, Zhang Xian explained the earlier happenings to them. Earlier, there were 15 nine-star master teachers attacking us simultaneously, and 3 of them only managed to clear the 9-star examination in the recent decade. As such, their state of mind and fighting prowess were clearly a notch lower, as compared to the rest of the group. Of the remaining 12, 7 of them have sustained some traumas in their long years of battle against the otherworldly demonic tribe, and they haven't fully recovered even now. 4 of them were serving as the linchpins of the formation, so they could not move too quickly, or else they would have risked the formation collapsing. Shenju's advancement of 20 steps forward happened to be where the 3 newly promoted 9-star master teachers were stationed. By sending them into a fluster, an opening was created in the formation for He Guangyu to drive away the 7 injured master teachers and force the linchpins to swiftly retreat. With that, there was no way for their formation not to collapse. Of course, as master teachers, it would be foolish to underestimate their flexibility in adapting to their situation and their fighting prowess. The key to the earlier maneuver actually lay in Lin Jianghai's 27 steps to the right. That area happened to be the point of convergence for their Jinqi in the formation. In other words, your maneuver effectively poisoned all of them with the crimson consonants. While they might appear to be completely fine on the surface, the truth is that they are currently busy suppressing their poison. Of course, given that the poison was distributed among all 15 of them, its effectiveness has been reduced considerably. Nevertheless, it still managed to scare them off for the time being. At the very least, they will not dare attack recklessly anytime soon. Well, given the lack of time, I couldn't come up with a wholesome plan. That's all I could come up quickly. Zhang Xian shook his head and sighed. Is that still not considered a wholesome plan to you? To think that you can calculate all of that in the spur of a moment. Timing, formation, analysis of the opponent. You were actually able to achieve an impeccable evaluation on all of those with just a swift look. Shenju and the others trembled as if they had seen a ghost. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.